Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Chapter 5. Backup. Chad left the very next day, quietly eager to find his abuelo. Upon having Soul Society, he paused. I need to play this smart, he reasoned. I don't know much about Soul Society, maybe I can enlist a couple of friends to help. Oi, Chad blinked and looked down. Seeing a very familiar black cat, he smiled. Yoruichi-san. It is good to see you, Chad. Kazuki told me why you are here, and I'm bored, so I thought I'd help you out, Yoruichi told him in her cat form's deep voice. The large teenager nodded gratefully at her. Thank you, Yoruichi-san. I appreciate it. The cat jumped up onto a nearby fence and began walking. Taking the hint, Chad began walking behind her. Soul Society is a big place, Chad-kun. How do you plan to find your grandfather? I'm not sure, Chad admitted. He fingered a very special coin in his pocket. It was a Mexican coin that his abuelo had given him, and he had used it as a constant reminder of his vow to never fight unless to protect others, a vow he had made the day his abuelo was buried. I brought a picture of him that I hoped to make copies of so I could post them periodically through Soul Society. A decent start, Yoruichi judged. But you should also realize that there is a chance he has already died here and passed on to the cycle of reincarnation. Chad bowed his head. I have thought of that. But if there is even the smallest chance for me to see him, I must try. Yoruichi sighed. Is there anything distinguishing about him? What's his name? His name is Oscar Joaquin de la Rosa, Chad told the cat quietly. Strong and lithe despite his age. Very self-controlled and kind. He'll take a punishment to protect those he cares for. Before he died he had short white hair and a mustache. He paused, taking out his wallet and presenting the many years old picture of his abuelo. About 5'9", height-wise. Anything else? The talking cat pressed hopefully. A tattoo maybe. Chad took a moment to think, straining his memory. Eventually he nodded. He has a large ornate rose tattoo on his left shoulder. Good. That will help in our search in the Rukongai. How large is Rukongai? Chad asked curiously. There are 80 districts in the 4 cardinal directions, Yoruichi stated, jumping down from the fence. 320 districts. Chad said incredulously. Like I said, Soul Society is a big place. Now come on, we need to make copies of that picture. Shortly afterward, Chad carried a backpack filled with over 1,000 flyers, all with a copy of Abuelo's picture and distinguishing information. So, how do you want to start? Yoruichi asked. Chad looked over the map of the districts and pointed at the first district to the north of Seraiti, where the Shinigami lived. We'll start with this one, and spiral around through the equivalent west, south and east districts, Chad decided after a few moments. It may take longer, but we'll pick up a reputation, which will help if my abuelo remembers me. He bowed his head. It has been a decade. Yoruichi leapt up and landed gracefully on Chad's shoulder. I'm sure he remembers you, Chad-kun. Let's begin. Agreed. Chad began walking. I'm coming, abuelo. Meanwhile, in the living world, Ichigo was in school again. He frowned, deep in concentration as he once again practiced his ability to sense his friends. Ichigo knew he could use spirit threads, also known as spirit ribbons, to detect and locate them. He'd been able to do that since his early days as a Shinigami, even before his friends had discovered their powers. However, that was more of a tracking measure than a detection one. It required a short time to focus and manifest the threads to the point where Ichigo could see each individual one. As a result, it was impractical to use the spirit threads for general sensing purposes. Ichigo nodded to himself as he once again located Inoue's unique Reiatsu signature. That was a little faster. If only my own Reiatsu didn't get in the way. He shook his head. I just have way too damn much for my body to contain it all. He sighed and started over, this time looking for Ishida's Reiatsu. Ishida Ryu paid only the most minor of attention to the class himself. He was busy studying his colleague and rival, Kurosaki Ichigo. The substitute Shinigami was growing incredibly strong, Ryu had to admit. He's only getting stronger. I refuse to fall behind, not when I have my powers back. But how do I grow stronger? Kurosaki's growth rate is inhuman. How can I hope to compare? He achieved Bankai, One of the hardest Shinigami goals, in 2 days. 2 days. You mentally slapped himself. Snap out of it, you. It's not like you to succumb to despair. We're opposites, Kurosaki and I. He has power. You could definitely feel the power. Kurosaki emitted more Reiatsu naturally in seconds than some Shinigami had at their entire disposal. But where he has power, I have control. He narrowed his eyes and gently pushed his glasses up a bit, making them glint and become opaque from the outside. Although he's been catching up in that regard, albeit slowly. You frowned pensively. Perhaps I should do the same. I am already very strong in control. I am quickly regaining the ability to draw in greater quantities of spirit particles. I'm still not up to where I was with the Sanrei glove, but it's still better than I used to be without. Speed-wise, I am doing well with my Harenkyaku. His frown deepened. But even with it, I am not even close to as fast as Kurosaki is in Bankai, in his Shinigami form. The Quincy shook his head. I should not dwell on it. Kurosaki, Inoue and I will all improve in our skirmishes, and I am still training outside them. With that, Ryu turned his attention back to class, absently gathering and releasing the ambient spirit particles in the air in a form of mindless training he had conditioned himself to do. Meanwhile, in Hawako Mundo, Yammy forced himself to sit still while an Arrancar medic reattached his arms. He seethed with rage at how he'd been humiliated by that little human girl and that orange-haired Shinigami. I am an Espada, one of the elite. To add insult to injury, Aizen had informed Yammy that he was not to have his arms healed until the next day, as punishment for some reason that Yammy couldn't remember off the top of his head. He was too full of rage at the ones who had almost killed him to recall why he had been punished. As soon as his arms were restored, he clenched his left fist angrily. I'll kill that son of a bitch and his little whore, Yammy swore to himself. The medic fled, not wanting to die from Yammy's tendency to smash things, and people, when upset. As that's so, came a new voice. Yammy turned to look, and saw a lithe, tall Arrancar with blue hair sticking up and back, whose mask remnant was on his right jaw. His Arrancar outfit was opened at the chest, revealing his hollow hole. You might be interested in something I'm putting together then. If it involves me killing that orange-haired Shinigami, Grimmjow, I'm in, Yammy agreed immediately. Grimmjow Jagerjackes grinned, much like a large cat might when it has trapped its prey. Great, my Frashin will be joining us in a raid on the human world tonight. His feral smile widened. We'll be killing everyone with even a modicum of spiritual power in that town. You can take on that Kurosaki Ichigo again if you wish. I'll just laugh as he tears you apart, and then I'll kill him. Yammy growled. He will die, even if I have to use my resurrection. Grimmjow smirked widely. Good. I want to see how good that human girl is, the one who kicked your ass. Just don't get in my way, Grimmjow. Nor you in mine, Yammy. A dimension away, Captain Commander Genryusai Yamamoto slammed his Zanpakudo, sealed as a walking stick, into the ground, the sound of which echoed through the hall where he and the rest of the loyal captains of Soul Society were gathered. Yesterday afternoon, 2 Arrancar attacked the human realm. Thanks to the Squad 12's Technology Bureau, we were able to scan their Reiatsu. A tall, laid-back-looking man with long stringy black hair cleared his throat. He wore a pink-flowered haori, a lightweight jacket that is worn over a kimono, over his captain uniform. Ma, Yama Jii, Hiraku Shunsui began, why is this unusual? We've met Arrancar before. Kuretsuchi Mayuri, captain of the 12th Division, was an odd-looking man with skin as white as a sheet, with glowing golden eyes and a strange piece of headgear that angled off to his right at a 90-degree angle from his body. His eyes and mouth were surrounded by black makeup, and he wore a large purple scarf around his neck. These Arrancar were different, he began with a large smile. The Arrancar we have seen before, they were unstable, incomplete. The ones that invaded yesterday stayed long enough for some of my scanners in the human world to get a good reading on them. These Arrancar are somehow stable. He grinned wider. Ooh, I can't wait to get my hands on one of them, to experiment on them. You might get your chance, Hitsugaya Tushiro, captain of the 10th Division, said coolly. He was extremely short, looking only 10 or 11 years old, in stark contrast to his sheer white hair, which stuck up in natural-looking spikes. Given that Aizen has the Haugyuku, and the emergence of these new Arrancar, it's probable that he's the one behind them. It looks as though he's building an army. Hitsugaya Taicho is right, Yukitake Jushiro, captain of the 13th Division stated. He was tall, and somewhat sickly looking, as though constantly suffering from a hidden ailment. His long white hair fell behind his head, with exception of a few bangs that partially covered his right eye. Aizen is working faster than expected. It is only lucky that Kurosaki Ichigo and his friends were able to repel them. Quite handily at that, Zaraki Kenpachi said with a bloodthirsty grin. The captain of the 11th Division was extremely tall, nearly 6'7", even without his spiked-up hair. His hair, oddly enough, had small bells at their tips, though the most noticeable thing about him was still his size and obvious strength. Ichigo's getting even stronger. I can't wait to fight him again. Yamamoto slammed his staff down again. Silence, he commanded. We were not expecting Aizen to attack so soon. We must send reinforcements to the human world. For the next time they attack, it will be en masse. We must keep as many captains here as possible. However, we lack captains for the 3rd, 5th, and 9th divisions. Kuchiki Byakuya, a noble whose expression had yet to change from the beginning of the meeting, stepped forward. His long, black hair waved gently about his shoulder as he spoke up. I propose Abarai Renji, my Fukutecho, be among the search team. He is one of the few who have been sent to the human world in recent times, and he is well known by the substitute Shinigami Kurosaki Ichigo and his allies. Further, he has achieved Bankai. Impressive, Shunsui murmured. He would seem to be an excellent choice. Perhaps we should promote him to captain, to relieve one of the empty spots. Byakuya shook his head. Not yet. He is not ready for the responsibilities of captain. So be it, Yamamoto intoned. Inform Abarai Renji Fukutecho that he may select as many non-captains as are available to go to the human world. One captain of his choice may join him. Shortly thereafter, Byakuya informed Renji, a fiery red-headed youth whose hair was styled in a pineapple-type ponytail, and whose tribal-appearing tattoos reached up his neck and arm, of his mission, and Renji set out to find the 2 people he knew he'd want to come along. Oi, Rukia. The rather short adopted member of the Kuchiki royal family turned around from her training, her glistening white released Zanpakuto shining. Upon spotting her childhood friend, Renji, she smiled. Renji, what are you up to? I'm being sent to the human world, and I've been asked to create a team to serve as reinforcements against Aizen's forces, Renji told her quickly. I'm to leave in about an hour. Want to come along? Rukia's smile broadened. Ichigo, of course, dumbass. I'd have kicked your ass if you had left without me. Renji chuckled. Then come on, I have another person or two to fetch. The black-haired girl merely sheathed her Zanpakuto, sealing it in its unreleased form again. Lead the way. Several minutes later, they came across the entrance to Squad 11's training round. Rukia blinked. Who are we looking for again? She asked, ignoring the many shirtless men fighting each other. The most bloodthirsty one here that isn't Kenpachi Taicho, Renji said with a smirk. Howl, Zabumaru. Renji's Zanpakuto warped and changed shape from the general katana of his unreleased form to a wide chain sword with wicked spikes emerging from the top of each segment. Did I just hear a pineapple-haired hothead release his Zanpakuto? An excited voice sounded from a ways away. A moment later, another tall, shirtless, muscle-bound man appeared in front of them. This one, however, was bald, and he wore a large grin reminiscent of Kenpachi. Renji smirked. Hey Akaku. He swung Zabumaru at him, and Zabumaru extended at Akaku, preparing to surround him, but the member of the 11th Division merely grinned wider and brought up his sword sheath to block in his left hand, his right hand already swinging to counter Renji. You'll have to do better than that. Madarame Akaku yelled gleefully as Renji skillfully dodged out of the way, allowing Zabumaru to come back together. Sorry, Akaku, but I'm afraid there's no time to spar, Renji said, and he truly did sound regretful. I've been asked to create a team to reinforce Ichigo and his pals from Aizen's forces. Apparently they sent in a scouting team yesterday before Ichigo kicked their asses. Wanna come? Akaku thought it over for about a second and a half. There's a good chance for a great fight. Pretty damn good chance of that, Renji agreed. Then I'm in. I'll come along too, a self-absorbed sounding voice butted in. Renji turned around to see a Yasugawa Yumashika, a self-proclaimed pretty boy. Yumashika wore his hair in such a way that it framed his face, and he had colorful feathers on his right eyebrow and eyelash. I'm rather interested in seeing what beauty products they have in the living world. Plus, I could use a good fight. Renji shrugged. He didn't know Yumashika that well, but he figured the extra manpower could be useful. Sure, why not? Oh, what's this? Yet another voice stated from nearby, this one being a bit bubbly. Fights stopped everywhere as men began to stare and drool at Matsumoto Rangaku, whose breasts were so large that there was a betting pool on whether she had implants. Natural or not, Rangaku was not ashamed of her extremely large assets and instead showed them off with a slightly opened Shinigami robe. Renji forced himself to pay attention to Rangaku's face and long, wavy, ginger-colored hair. While he was a red-blooded male, he was on a mission. For the third time in several minutes, he reiterated the situation. Oh really? Well, I want to come too. I'd like to see Orihime again. She's turning out to be quite some competition for me in this department, Rangaku said airily, folding her arms under her enormous boobs, enhancing their looks further. Several men by that point had nosebleeds by that point and tried desperately to conceal them. Renji sighed, fighting off the urge to do the same. Rangaku-san, please stop holding up your... He felt a chill and paused, glancing at Rukia, who was staring at him with such intensity that he almost froze in place. Your... Renji could feel Rukia's killing intent now, and thought furiously, to look for a way not to get himself hit. Honestly, she's scarier than her brother sometimes, he sighed. Rangaku blinked, and looked very innocent as she asked, holding up my what, Renji-kun? She then leaned in for the answer, giving Renji quite an ample view if he chose to look. In Renji's head, there was a war going on. One side of him told him to look and damn the consequences. A second side wanted him to simply finish his statement with as much dignity as he could and hope Rukia didn't beat on him too much. The third was screaming to run away before Rukia even thought he was considering looking. Wham! Too late, Renji thought to himself as Rukia smacked the back of his head. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on the point of view, he hadn't been prepared for it and so his back hunched forward, his head bent downwards, straight into Rangaku's massive mammary. Why, Renji, Rangaku positively purred, putting her hands on the back of Renji's head, gently keeping him there. So forward, I like that in a man. Renji could feel Rukia's Reiatsu flaring ever higher, her killing intent skyrocketing. Oh fuck, he quickly broke free and backed away from the two of them, his eyes wide and hands waving in front of him, trying to ward them off. No, it was a mistake. Oh, you didn't like it. Rangaku pouted. His traitorous tongue answered before his brain could intercept the response. Of course I liked it. Shit. Renji, Rukia growled, drawing her sealed Zanpakudo. Rukia, you can kill me later. We need to go back up Ichigo and his gang, Renji pointed out, hoping against hope that she'd give him a reprieve. Rukia was silent for a minute. Fine. She sheathed Soda no Shirayuki and turned away. Then she looked over her shoulder and added darkly, but you will pay for that. Renji wiped the beginnings of sweat from his brow. Too close, he breathed. Akaku clapped a hand on his shoulder, almost startling Renji. He'd practically forgotten the bald man was there. Well, at least you got a good look, he whispered. The redhead stayed silent. When there is no good answer, say nothing at all if you wish to live, he reminded himself, watching Rukia's tense form. He shook his head after a moment. If Rangaku-san is coming, then we need someone who can handle her and make sure she doesn't kill me, he muttered. Alright, everyone meet me at the Shinigami R&D Institute to get your Gigai. I got one more person to get. Several minutes later, no, Hitsugaya Tushiro stated clearly. But Hitsugaya Taicho, how are we supposed to manage her? Renji pleaded. She doesn't listen to any male but you, and Rukia's not going to stop her because Matsumoto Fukutecho outranks her. I refuse to go with you, the 10th Division captain insisted. It will be nice to have Matsumoto away for a short while. And do what? Paperwork. Renji retorted. She is a Fukutecho, after all, so she'll have to do paperwork too, and guess who'll have to do it if she's gone? Tushiro blinked. You have a point, he said slowly. Not to mention that she probably left everything for the last minute. Again, he nodded. Very well, I'll come along, if only to avoid the paperwork. Renji breathed a sigh of relief. Thank Kami. Ichigo sighed. Class was finally over. Now, let's see, I was at Urahara's for training yesterday, so today it's the Vizard's turn. He nodded to himself and headed back home for a nap. He would need the extra sleep, as the Vizard would keep him up all night. He climbed in through his window to avoid his father. Ichigo was extremely tired, and didn't feel like tussling with his incredibly annoying parent. He lied down in bed and closed his eyes, letting sleep wash over him like a warm blanket. Little did Ichigo know that his sleep was going to be interrupted. 6 Shinigami and Gigais, all in their school uniforms, they had tried to catch Ichigo at school, only to be too late, approached the Kurosaki residence. Yeah, Ichigo's here, Rukia said with a smile. Though if I didn't know better, I'd say he's exhausted, judging from the feel of his reiatsu. Nonsense, Rangaku argued playfully. What could keep him exhausted? Better question, Tushiro interrupted, somehow knowing that Rangaku was going to make a sexual answer to her own question. How do we alert Kurosaki that we're here? Last I recall he was not proficient at sensing reiatsu signatures. Rukia smirked. Let me. She quickly clambered up the tree and into Ichigo's open window. He'd forgotten to close it. However, no sooner had she climbed in, did the orange-haired substitute Shinigami appear in front of her, murder in his eyes as his strong hand gripped her throat and held her up. Rukia was shocked by the response, enough that she didn't react before Ichigo recognized her. He immediately dropped her, where Rukia landed on her feet nimbly, rubbing her throat. Rukia, Ichigo murmured, confused and tired. What are you doing here? Baka strawberry, Rukia yelled, somehow pulling a notebook out of nowhere and smacking Ichigo's head with it. What was that for? Ow, at least give me a chance to explain before you smack me, you violent midget. Ichigo retorted. I'll show you violent midget, you absurdly tall idiot. The Shinigami outside sweat dropped from the shouting. Renji, did you know that Rukia was this violent? Akaku asked. Renji shook his head, equally dumbfounded. I thought she was only that violent to me, not Ichigo. She must be really fond of him. If possible, the other's sweat dropped more as the sounds of a beating ensued. You call this fond? Yumashika asked in astonishment. Perhaps Rukia belongs in the 11th division, Akaku offered with a shrug. Having fun doing violence is our type of thing. But I thought the 11th division frowns on Kido-type Zanpakuto, Rangaku pointed out. Rukia's is an ice type, like Taicho. Get back on track, people, Tushiro ordered, lightly irritated. I'm stuck with a bunch of so-called adults with the attention spans of a hummingbird, oi. Kuchiki, Kurosaki, get down here. They were down several seconds later, though Ichigo gave a very dirty look to an innocent-looking Rukia for a second. Then he turned to the others. Renji, mind telling me what's going on here? Put simply, we're here as backup, Renji explained with a shrug. We'll talk more in your room so we can't be overheard. Let us in. Ichigo sighed. All right then, but hurry, I don't even want to think about what my father will think of this. Thankfully, Kurosaki Ishin was nowhere in sight, so Ichigo managed to get them all into his room easily. Ah, a voice cried from the closet. Nei-san, Kon, a mod soul that inhabited a lion plush most of the time, lunged out towards Rukia. Without even looking, Rukia brought her foot up and stomped Kon to the ground. Pervert. Nice angle, Kon said, looking up Rukia's skirt, completely unharmed. He was, after all, made of plush. With a notable twitch above her left eye, Rukia repeatedly stomped on Kon before kicking him back against the closet door. Ichigo merely sighed and shook his head. Damn it Kon, can't you behave? Where's the fun in that? Then Kon seemed to spot Rangaku. His beady eyes grew large. Oh sweet Kami, the land of the goddesses has appeared before me. He lunged again, this time at Rangaku's ample breasts. The shapely woman merely caught him and held him in front of her face. Wait, is this a mod soul? You stuck him in a plush body? She asked incredulously. Yeah, Ichigo answered with a shrug. I felt bad keeping him in pill form all the time. That, and he's good at stress relief, with no need to worry about injuries. I'm also quite good with pleasuring a woman, Kon told Rangaku, trying to entice her into letting him finally get sex. Ichigo snatched him out of Rangaku's grip and threw him out the window. Go take a walk, he yelled after it, then he shut the window and sat down on his bed. So, explain. The Arrancar attacked early, Toshiro stated simply. Yamamoto Saotaicho decided to send some backup, as it's almost certain they'll attack again, and soon. But why you guys? Well, I was originally chosen to lead the team, Renji began, as I have achieved Bankai and know you. Rukia came along because she knows you pretty well, and has recovered her powers. I asked Akaku to come with because I trust him. Yumashika-san and Rangaku-san overheard and decided to come too, and I invited Hitsugaya Taicho to help handle Rangaku-san and get away from paperwork. Okay, I get all that, Ichigo began, but when do you head back? Probably not until the Arrancar threat is over, Renji responded with a thoughtful look on his face. Why? Where are you going to stay? Well, here, Rangaku replied, surprised he had even asked. You might not have noticed, but my room isn't that big, Ichigo told her dryly. There's no way I can keep you all here. What? Rangaku cried out. Then what good are you? Ichigo blinked. You must be kidding. Don't you guys have things like rent in Soul Society? Here in the living world, people who take advantage of other people's generosity without giving something in return are known as freeloaders and are not respected. Rangaku blinked, then reached up to start unbuttoning her shirt. Ichigo's eyes widened, but he was too tired to stop her energetically like he would normally do. Rangaku-san, stop, he said tiredly. I'm the son and sometimes assistant of a doctor. You don't have anything I haven't already seen. And while I'm sure you could give me absolutely spectacular sex in exchange for staying here, that's not something I want or need right now. He shook his head. Besides, even if I weren't a moral man, where would you stay in here? It's a rather small room. And I've done my best to make sure my family isn't involved in Shinigami business, so I can't just sleep on the couch until the Arrancar are gone. Rangaku pouted at him but rebuttoned her shirt. That was a different reaction that I usually get, she observed. What can I say? I'm an unusual guy, Ichigo told her dryly. Kurosaki has a point about the lack of space, Toshiro mused. What about your friends? Well, I'm sure Inoue would be happy to have a friend or two over, Ichigo answered, thinking it over. Chad and Ishida both live on their own. Ishida would say no in a heartbeat, he really dislikes Shinigami. Chad, Ichigo shook his head. Sorry, but Chad's place is really too small for more than one person. Try Urahara's. Renji nodded. That's where I'm going. I need to get answers from him anyways. I'm staying right here, in your closet like we used to, Rukia stated firmly, crossing her arms and doing her best to look stern. As Ichigo nodded at the short brunette, Rangaku jumped at the opportunity. You stayed in his closet. With no supervision. She gave a knowing smile. How forward, Ichigo? It's not like that, Ichigo protested. This was after she gave me her powers, and had nowhere to stay. And besides, she's the one who insisted on it. That was only because you needed to do my job and kill hollows for me. Rukia growled at Ichigo. How dare he try to pin her on me? Yeah, and that's only because you didn't do your damn job to begin with and kill the one threatening my family. Ichigo retorted. And who's the idiot who threw himself at the hollow without any powers at all? Rukia argued. Oh, right, you. Midget, strawberry, HMPH. They both looked away from each other. After a few moments, Ichigo turned to the others. Okay, so Renji's gonna try to stay at Urahara's. Rukia's staying here. What about you guys? Meh, we'll find a place on our own, Yumashika said with a shrug. Yeah. 11th Division members are tough. We'll sleep outside if we need, Akaku continued. I still want to stay here, Rangaku said with a large smile. Ichigo sighed. There's no room for you here. I could stay in the closet with Rukia, Rangaku suggested. Ichigo opened the closet, showing its small space. It's barely big enough for her, and she's a midget. Whack, I am not a midget. You're just abnormally tall, Rukia argued, putting away her notepad. Ichigo opened his mouth to retort, then sighed. Whatever, Rukia. Everyone blinked. You okay? The adopted Kuchiki clan member asked, uncertain of Ichigo's sudden unwillingness to banter. I'm fine, just tired, Ichigo reassured her. Been doing a lot of training. I'd best not reveal my mask, not if Soul Society banished the Vizard. What kind of training? Renji asked, curious. Ichigo shrugged, and wordlessly summoned his Zanpakuto into existence. He hefted it up onto his shoulders with only his right arm, which had been growing much stronger ever since he started training in his human form. Noting the astonished looks, Ichigo smirked. Zangetsu here told me I could do this one day, and I've been training without going Shinigami. Doing things this way helps build up my base strength and speed, so when I do become a Shinigami, I'm that much faster and stronger without resorting to my Reiatsu. Not to mention, it keeps me from being completely vulnerable if something happens to my badge. He let Zangetsu dissipate back into spirit particles. Also been learning Kido, so Rukia can't just slap me with simple Bakudo and keep me down. I don't think it'll ever be my strong point, but I do need some knowledge of it. A wise idea, Toshiro stated, crossing his arms and looking at Ichigo appraising Ly. Perhaps he's not just a hothead like I thought he was. You look stressed, Ichigo-kun, Rangaku purred, crawling up to sit next to Ichigo. Stressed, Ichigo mused. Yeah, I suppose I am. Constant training, worrying about Aizen, he shook his head. Maybe when Aizen's dead I can get a vacation. There are other ways to distress, you know, Rangaku suggested. Ichigo stood up. That's enough, he said coldly, giving her the full force of his glare. I've told you, Rangaku-san, that I'm not interested. You are not staying here, and you are not having sex with me. Understood. Rangaku froze and swallowed, feeling Ichigo's slightly flaring Reiatsu. Then her expression turned serious. Understood, Ichigo-san. Good. He pointed at the window. Now, out with all of you. Rangaku-san, Toshiro. It's Hitsugaya Taicho. Ichigo ignored him. You two should try Inoue's. I'm pretty sure she's got the room. The rest of you already have your plans, so get going. Yeah, sure. Akaku and Yumashika quickly jumped out the window. Thanks for the tip, Toshiro told Ichigo in a rare display of appreciation before he turned and jumped out the window himself. He was particularly impressed at how Ichigo had managed to get Rangaku to respond to his authority, despite the woman not knowing him well and his lack of a proper position. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable, Rangaku apologized. Ichigo sighed and settled down. You didn't, but I meant it when I said I'm not interested. Your repeated attempts just irritated me. Rangaku looked him in the eye, looking for something. She apparently found it, because she nodded. Some men try the hard-to-get trick to see if it helps get inside my robes. I just wanted to see if you were different. Ichigo looked outside at the night sky. Rangaku-san, I'll admit I do like to banter, especially with short stuff here. Hey, but for future reference, I usually mean what I say. When I am teasing or bantering, I make it relatively obvious. You are attractive, but I am not interested in having sex with you. He gave a hollow, chuckle. Not when there is so much I must do to make sure my friends and I don't get killed. Rangaku nodded, and wordlessly made her own escape through the window. He turned to Rukia. Rukia, I'm tired, and I'm frustrated, and all I want is to get an hour or two of sleep before I get going for tonight's training. So please, for the love of Kami, do me a favor and just keep quiet in your closet. Rukia took a closer look at Ichigo's face, and saw the small circles slowly forming under his eyes from lack of proper rest. She nodded silently and quietly set up the closet, which did not take long. Ichigo had left it as it was from when she was originally sleeping there. Thank you, Ichigo said gratefully, flopping back onto his bed. You know, Ichigo, we will fight again soon. Yeah, in 5 days. If you don't take care of yourself, then I'll win and take over your body. I know, it'd be easy to do it now, when you're exhausted and can't fight back, King. I suppose it would. Ichigo turned a mental glare at his inner hollow. But our pride wouldn't accept that. We both want to fight when we're at our best, to see who's stronger. We agreed on 2 weeks, and you're desperate enough for a good fight to wait until then. A dark laugh resounded in Ichigo's head. You know me too well already. Ichigo was silent for a moment. Tell me, what is your name? I can't just keep referring to you as Hollow, now can I? If I have a name, I don't know it. Finding himself interested in the topic, Ichigo fought to stay awake to continue the conversation. Then what about other hollows? How do they know their names? I mean, there's Grand Fisher, you can't tell me that's his original name as a plus soul. Ichigo received the mental equivalent of a shrug. Not sure, King. I think, when the hollow consumes the plus and gains dominance, he creates his own name based on his powers. If that were the case, what about that Yammy and Ulquiorra? How do you know Aizen didn't name them? Suppose you're right. With that, Ichigo drifted off to sleep, uncaring that Rukia was likely watching him. It reminded him of better times, when life was simpler, where Rukia guided him and Ichigo slew hollows for her, where there were no knowledge of grand conspiracies, no knowledge of Aizen, no knowledge of the weight that now lay directly on his and his friend's shoulders. In his mindscape, however, Hollow Ichigo looked perturbed. Summoning out the spiritual form of Zangetsu, they stared at each other for a few minutes. How did you learn your name? Hollow Ichigo finally asked. Zangetsu merely smirked and shook his head. That frustrated the hollow enough for him to scowl, looking even more like Ichigo than he normally did. No, really, how? You're an effing sword. Who named you? Zanpakudo are born from the strength and will of the wielder's soul, Zangetsu eventually said. I have always been with Ichigo, though he will never know. I have grown and matured as he did. Eventually, his soul whispered a name, and I realized as though I had known it all along, that it was my name. He looked into the hollow's amber eyes. Give it time. You will soon learn your own name. Hollow Ichigo was hardly satisfied by that answer, but before he could question Zangetsu further, the spirit had dissipated into black spirit particles and flown back into his midsection. I suppose I will just wait, then, I wonder what my name is. I hope it's Kickass. Outside, Rukia silently watched Ichigo's breathing slow, hidden in the closet, until she was sure he was asleep. She leaned back in the closet. Ichigo, you've changed. How can you have changed so much, in so little time? It has been barely any time at all since I've seen you, and yet you've matured so much. In the darkness and safety of knowing that Ichigo would never see it, she allowed her expression to change to worry. And you're training yourself to the bone. She felt the stirrings of guilt grip her. I shouldn't have brought you so far into my world. You're a mortal human, you haven't died yet. You should have been allowed a normal life. Rukia looked sadly at her human friend through the crack between the closet door and the wall. When Nisama pierced your soul sleep and chain link, you could have stayed human and returned to your life. And yet, when you had that chance, you chose to take up the mantle of Shinigami again. I'm glad you saved me, and I'm grateful you are going to lend your power to fighting Aizen, but I can't help but wish that on that day, I had been strong enough to protect your family from that hollow, and never brought you into my world. She sighed, thinking about what could have happened if that night had gone better. Who knows, maybe that would have changed everything. There would have been no need for me to recover my powers, so I would never have gotten that Gigai from Urahara. Then I would never have had the Haugyuku hidden in my soul, and Aizen wouldn't have gotten his paws on it. He wouldn't have openly betrayed us all without a way to create his Arrancar. She shook her head. I shouldn't think about what ifs. There is only the present we live in, and the future we shape. Once more, she looked at her orange-haired friend. Ichigo, I don't think this town will need to worry, with how strong you are becoming. Outside, high in the sky, those few people with spiritual awareness could see a tear in the sky, like jaws suddenly being forced open. From that black opening, several figures stepped out. Yammy was first, followed directly after by Grimmjow and his Frashin, Arrancar of lesser strength who served the Espada. Yammy punched his right fist into his left palm. I can't wait for my rematch with that orange-haired Shinigami, Kurosaki Ichigo. Then shut up and help us search for him. According to Ulquiorra's report, there are only a few beings with significant Reiatsu here, Grimmjow said. So let's use our Pesquisa. All the Arrancar closed their eyes and pulsed with their Reiatsu. All of a sudden, Rukia's Shinigami cell phone rang, at the same time Ichigo's Shinigami badge screamed, Hollow. Son of a bitch, Ichigo swore as he woke up, mildly refreshed from his short nap. He smacked himself with his Shinigami badge, letting his human body fall back to the bed. Rukia. I know. Rukia was already in her Shinigami form as she opened the closet door, shutting it behind her. She leapt out the window, Ichigo right behind her. Ichigo frowned and reached out with his spiritual sense, feeling beyond the haze of his own Reiatsu. The fact that he could immediately feel something undeniably hollow, yet almost Shinigami, made him wary. There's at least one really strong Arrancar out there. You sure? Rukia yelled back. Positive, I've faced them before, and this Reiatsu is definitely similar. Damn it, it's still daylight, there are humans to worry about. Rukia cursed. Then let's hope they're still hollow-like in their behavior, Ichigo stated grimly. They should come after the ones with the most spiritual power. I'll give them something to focus on. Rukia, you make sure the other Shinigami are ready to protect those with even a modicum of Reiatsu. She nodded, seeing the tactical strength of that plan. Right. They both shunpoed away in different directions, Ichigo towards the Arrancar Reiatsu, and Rukia towards Renji and the others. Grimmjow opened his eyes. There are far more than Ulquiorra reported. He growled. Kill everyone with any Reiatsu at all. Massacre them. Yes, my liege. Grimmjow's 5 Frashin shunpoed in various directions, towards Ishida's house, Urahara's store, Inoue's house, and a street where Akaku and Yumashika were walking. You don't order me around, Grimmjow, Yammy retorted. But I'll go after Kurosaki. Maybe if I feel like it, I'll help you out. No need to look for me, Yammy. Yammy spun and saw Ichigo, with Zangetsu in Shikai, looking at him coldly. I'm already here. You want a rematch? Fine, I'll purify you with Zangetsu here and send you on to Soul Society. He smirked. I'm sure you'll make a fine Shinigami one day. How dare you? Yammy roared, deeply insulted by the insinuation that he would ever become his most hated foe. Simple, the same way I'm going to kill you without going Bankai, Ichigo boasted. Ha, Yammy laughed with a smirk, did you forget? Your measly Shikai can't cut me. Wanna bet? Ichigo rushed at Yammy, relishing the feel of his increased speed and strength. That training in my human form really paid off. Ichigo wasn't as fast he had shown Yammy in his human Bankai state, but it was still significantly faster than Ichigo had been in Shinigami Shikai before his training. Yammy was arrogant, but he had felt Ichigo's power firsthand previously, and he wasn't completely stupid. He knew that Shinigami were much stronger and faster than humans typically were. He also knew that before, when he had claimed that Kurosaki Ichigo couldn't cut him, Kurosaki had increased his power and done just that. Further, his Hiero was weakened in the human world. So, perhaps wisely, Yammy used Sonido to disappear and reappear behind Ichigo, left arm already raised for a vicious backhand that he felt would surely take Ichigo's head off. However, he hadn't taken into account that Ichigo had only used his right arm to swing Zangetsu, and his left arm was free. Ichigo brought his free arm up and blocked Yammy's strike before spinning and using the spin's momentum to slice with Zangetsu once more. This time he struck true. Yammy, being off guard from Ichigo's block, failed to move completely out of the way and was struck in roughly the same place he had struck Ichigo's forearm, slicing partway into it before Yammy could Sonido backwards, out of range. Ichigo and Yammy, separated by a dozen meters or so, stared at each other for a few seconds, each of them analyzing their wounds. That really hurt, Ichigo realized. I think my bone cracked there. Gotta be careful, he's too strong to simply block, and I don't want to reveal my trump card yet. He can cut me with that sword, and he's fast, Yammy thought to himself, his anger boiling. How dare he make a fool of me, and Espada? How dare he bring me down so low? A laugh distracted them both as they turned to see the source of the noise. Grimmjow merely laughed more. See, Yammy, I told you he'd kick your ass again. And look, he hasn't even gone Bankai yet. Why don't you go try to go kill that human girl again, the one who took your other arm? She might be easier prey. You're kicking his ass without going Bankai. Way to humiliate him, King. He has no chance. Hollow Ichigo crowed. I'm trying to provoke him into using his Resurrection, Ichigo explained. If I can beat him then we can get Ulquiorra on our side, and use Aizen's own creation against him. Ooh, I like that idea. Poetic vengeance, for stealing Soul Society's captains to use against them. I thought so too. For once, Both hollow Ichigo and Ichigo's emotions and mental expressions were identical, a sadistic glee. That's it, I've had it with both of you. Yammy bellowed, his mighty rage making his Reiatsu flare. Wait, is he getting bigger? Ichigo asked incredulously. Indeed, where Yammy had been large, and about 6.5 feet tall before, he had now grown to 10 feet tall and showed no signs of stopping. Yammy's Arrancar uniform stretched and stretched until the part covering his torso ripped to shreds. Finally, Yammy seemed to stop at 15 feet tall. What the hell? Suddenly, a garganta opened nearby, and Ulquiorra stepped out. Yammy, return to Hueco Mundo at once. What? Yammy asked, not believing his own ears. But Ulquiorra, I was about to annihilate this bastard. No, Yammy, you are not fully prepared for your fight with Kurosaki, Ulquiorra countered tonelessly. I wish to see the true outcome of your battle when you are at your strongest, Yammy, and that is in Hueco Mundo, after you have devoured sufficient hollows to maintain your resurrection state. Yammy slowly began to deflate with a sigh, his anger dispersing. Yes, Ulquiorra, he sullenly entered the garganta. As it was closing, Ulquiorra looked Ichigo dead in the eyes. We will see each other soon, Kurosaki Ichigo. And then the garganta was closed, leaving only Grimmjow and Ichigo. Well, wasn't expected Ulquiorra to butt in, Grimmjow muttered. But hey, that means I get to fight you myself. He grinned. Nice to meet you, Kurosaki Ichigo. I am the sixth Espada, Grimmjow Jagerjackez. Ooh, I like him. That's 'cause he sounds like you. Of course, why else would I like someone? Ichigo readied his blade, and Grimmjow frowned. I want a true fight, Kurosaki. Use your Bankai. I guarantee you'll need it against me. Ichigo scowled, reaching out with his spiritual sense, only to confirm Grimmjow's words. Grimmjow was on a whole new level from Yammy, with incredibly strong Reiatsu. Fine then, Grimmjow. He threw out Zangetsu and flared his Reiatsu. Bankai. Chapter 6. Release. Dance. Sota no Shirayuki. Rukia glared at the Arrancar in front of her as she spun her glistening white Zanpakudo, its long ribbon flowing its wake. Cold air blasted in every direction as Sota no Shirayuki twirled in her hand. Oh, a release already. I'm honored, bro, the Arrancar in front of her said sarcastically. He was tall, with extremely long, bone-straight blonde hair. His hollow hole was barely visible in white Arrancar outfit, while the remains of his mask was on top of his head. His face, framed by locks of hair, was very effeminate, and if it wasn't for his voice, Rukia would almost mistake him for a girl. Just what I was looking for, an enemy to practice on, Rukia taunted back. The Shinigami's got bark, let's see how she bites, the Arrancar replied with a mocking smile. Arrancar numero 15, Yilfort grants. I see no point revealing my name to someone who will shortly be dead, Rukia retorted coldly. Quickly reversing her grip on her beautiful Zanpakudo, so she was holding it upside down, she used Shunpo to rush at the Arrancar. A forward rush, how predictable, the Yilfort drawled, falling back into a position to block and deflect. He was therefore surprised when Rukia appeared behind him, not attacking at all. Some no mai, Tsukishiro, first dance, White Moon. She slashed to her side, not even trying to hit him. Yilfort blinked as a whitish glow erupted in a full circle around him, but then felt a numbing cold crawling up his feet. Glancing down, he saw ice growing up his feet as what looked like snowflakes and ice particles flew upwards from the ground. Rukia was still standing behind him within the circle's influence, expression as cold as the air around her with her sword held out to her side. Then she straightened and left the circle, turning to smirk at Yilfort. Yilfort merely jumped backwards with some effort, breaking the ice's hold on him. You really think freezing the ground, and the air above that circle, will trap me? He asked incredulously. You must be really weak, Shinigami, to expect me to not notice the air around me getting colder too. Rukia's smirk turned to a frown as she returned her grip back to right side up. You were caught in it for a short time, she pointed out. Considering I'm not even a seated officer, you must be the weakest of the lot. Yilfort grew angry. You've got a lot of nerve saying that. He rushed at her, drawing his sword and preparing to slice her in half. Rukia parried with a spin, slicing at Yilfort's unprotected head. To her surprise, instead of jumping back or blocking, Yilfort crouched, lowering his head enough so Rukia only caught the barest ends of his hair. As the raven-haired Shinigami's sword whizzed over the Arrancar's head, Yilfort made a vicious stab. Rukia attempted to dodge, but was skewered in her left shoulder. She winced as she jumped back, feeling out the wound with her Reiatsu. It's not too bad, she realized. I can still use my arm. He seems to like up close. Let's see how he handles long distance. Jumping in the air, she threw her good arm up and gently put her left hand on her right forearm. Hado 31. Shakuho. Yilfort saw the red fireball, and for a moment he felt intense rage. Red, he mentally snarled before regaining himself and trying to dodge. His momentary distraction cost him, however, as he was hit in the arm, burning him. Hado 31. Shakuho. He narrowed his eyes, once more feeling the rage as the red color almost overwhelmed his sight, and dodged. I've had it with you. He clutched his Zanpakuto. Skewer. Del Toro. Smoke engulfed the Arrancar momentarily, and when it cleared, a monster stood in its place. Now hunched over, Yilfort's feet had transformed into hooves, and his legs had grown enormous. However, this was nothing compared to his torso, which had broadened a good 5 feet, and thickened to more than 2.5 feet from back to front. Yilfort's shoulders had bone-like plates covering them, and his arms looked much like his legs. His mask had completely regenerated, covering his head and growing 2 horns, curved and long. Yilfort's long blonde hair remained, but was now scraggly and waved behind him. He resembled nothing so much more than a demented bull. Rukia smirked, seeing the transformation. Your Zanpakuto name is, of the bull. Now I know why you transformed. You can't stand the color red, can you? She questioned with a knowing look. Shut up, you annoying little bitch. Yilfort bellowed, his voice slightly deeper. Hado 31. Shakuho. Yilfort roared and charged on all fours, attempted to skewer, hence the command line of his Zanpakuto, Rukia on his horns. He blasted through the Kido like it was nothing, not even retaining a burn. Rukia merely jumped over his head and spun around, waiting for Yilfort to turn around. Slow turn around speed in that form, let's check. Hado 31. Shakuho. Once again, Yilfort tried to run her down, but this time he leapt up in the air to leave that option not available to the nimble Shinigami. This time, though Rukia used Shunpo to her left, Yilfort, sensing Rukia, kept running and turned around that way. Just as he finished turning around, he felt the flame of another Shakuho blast hit him. Ha, your attacks are nothing, Shinigami. Yilfort crowed, rushing once more at his hated foe. Unseen through the smoke, Rukia quickly stabbed the ground in front of her, creating the white circle again. She then rapidly punctured the icy earth 4 times in a semicircle around her and took a battle stance, turned to her right side with both hands on the hilt in such a way that she could thrust forward strongly. Tsugi no Mai, Hakuren next dance, white ripple, Rukia murmured as ice particles flew upwards from the holes in the ground. An enormous blast of ice erupted from her Zanpakuto in a straight line in front of her, hitting and encasing Yilfort, who on his part looked shocked from the unexpected new attack which had dispelled the smoke a moment before. Rukia turned on her heel, eyes closed. Your killer's name is Kuchiki Rukia, she announced as she spun Soda no Shirayuki once more and slowly sheathed it. At the moment that the hilt hit the sheath, the ice, and Yilfort, shattered. She opened her eyes and frowned, calling up her spiritual sense. She ignored the increased throbbing her injured shoulder alerted her to, and instead looked for her red-headed friend. Renji's over at Urahara's, the others can handle themselves. She leapt into the air and disappeared using Shunpo to go aid her friend. Renji merely sighed, his opponent wasn't as strong as he'd expected. Is this really the best you have, D-Roy? Shut it, you stupid monkey. A tick appeared over Renji's eye. Howl, Zabumaru, he yelled, swinging his Shikai extra fast this time. D-Roy barely blocked with his own Zanpakuto, which was chipped by Zabumaru's repeated attacks. Renji swung the hilt to his side, bringing Zabumaru swinging around him, only for him to pull it straight down. The extending blade fragments ripped forward and through D-Roy's Zanpakuto, embedding the spike from the end piece into D-Roy's head, silencing him forever. Renji sighed and resealed Zabumaru into his normal form, sheathing him just as Rukia arrived. "You're uninjured?" Rukia asked, mildly surprised. "Meh, this guy was a pushover." "Not nearly what I expected," Renji said with a shrug. "You." "My shoulder, but nothing that can't wait," Rukia answered. "How many more are there?" "I suck at sensing them," Renji muttered. "Only 3, Rukia said after a moment, doing the equivalent of a spiritual headcount. "Your friend Madarame-san is fighting someone, with Yumashika-san nearby." She frowned. "It feels like Madarame is hurt, but Yumashika is not fighting at all. Hitsugaya Taicho and Matsumoto Fukuteicho are both fighting, and somewhat injured." Renji nodded. "That sounds about right. But why is Yumashika-san not fighting?" Rukia demanded. "Pride," Renji said simply. "Shinigami of the 11th squad fight their battles one-on-one. To do otherwise is to brand yourself a coward. Akaku is probably just fighting with his sealed Zanpakuto to draw out the fight." Rukia shut up. She knew very well about fights for pride. Stupid men and their damn pride. Damn it, Kyan Dono, why did you make that fight one of pride? I could have saved you. She pushed back the memories of Kyan, and Yukitaki's explanation of the difference between a fight for life and a fight for pride. "In that case, let's go help out Hitsugaya Taicho." Renji glanced over his shoulder at the Urahara shop, where he still hadn't gained entry. His face hardened and he turned back to Rukia. "Lead the way." In a flash of shunpo, they were gone. A few minutes ago, Hitsugaya Tushiro's typical uncaring frown had only grown deeper since he had begun fighting. He was fighting a tall Arrancar who had introduced himself as Shalong Kuafang. The Arrancar in question had a bit of a long face, with braided black hair. His hollow mask remnant resembled a hat that Tushiro had seen Mayuri wear, as it jutted out to Shalong's right. However, Shalong's mask remnant also went over his left eye. Tushiro had already released his Bankai, Daiguren Hiranmara, which allowed him to control water and ice, even water vapor, in the vicinity and form it into attacks. In Bankai mode, ice grew out into surprisingly flexible wings and a tail. His left arm from his shoulder down, and his legs from the thighs down, were covered in ice and ended in claws. Ice in the shape of a dragon head also encased his right hand, binding his Zanpakuto to it. There had been 3 flowers with 4 petals apiece hovering behind him, but during the fight one of the flowers had melted. 2 more flowers to go before I lose my Bankai, and yet, even without releasing, this Shalong can fight me to a draw. If this keeps up, I'll have to release the limiter. Shalong calmly looked at the captain of the 10th division. "It looks like one of your flowers has completely melted away. I wonder, is that a countdown? You are, after all, still young. Your Bankai is likely not quite mature." Tushiro silently seethed. "Damn it, I will grow up eventually. Why can't you just get a damn growth spurt, stupid body?" Shalong paused and looked over his shoulder. Looks like Yilfort has released." He released rather quickly. He likely underestimated his opponent. He gave a polite smile to Tushiro. "I suppose I should release as well. After all, to defeat a Shinigami captain without releasing would be rude and disrespectful of his accomplishments." "Shit." Tushiro rushed in, preparing more Reiatsu for a gamble. He lunged at Shalong, attempting a fast and powerful stab. Shalong deflected Tushiro relatively easily, shifting him to the side and slashing partway into the captain's wing. "Was that all?" "No, it wasn't," Tushiro growled. Unseen behind Shalong, Tushiro's ice tail had extended as the Shinigami had dashed, now it lashed out. Ice and Arrancar Reiatsu collided, causing a small explosion of smoke. Did it work? Tushiro wondered, retracting his tail back to himself. He didn't dare rush into the smoke, he wasn't good at fighting blind. "Shit," he uttered, once the smoke cleared, revealing a mostly unscathed Shalong. Shalong's hand and Zanpakuto had been frozen together, as he had blocked Tushiro's sneak attack with them behind his back. "I must say, Captain, I find myself disappointed," Shalong stated simply as he flexed his arm and hand, shattering the ice and freeing himself. "Is this all you have? And look, 2 more petals have fallen. Allow me to defeat you while we are still at our best." Snip, Tyretta. Reiatsu swirled around the Arrancar, coming off in streams around him as Tushiro desperately tried to think of a way to defeat this opponent. When Shalong emerged, His arms had thinned and become covered with a bone-like substance, which extended to his shoulders and upper torso, resembling an upper armor. The mask had also lengthened to cover the entirety of the left side of Shalong's face, while the back now had a long cord-like extension with 2 curved blades on the end. However, the most drastic things that had changed were Shalong's hands. Instead of the human they had been, now they were the stuff of nightmares. 5 long, bony, incredibly sharp-looking claws emerged from each wrist. Extended, each claw was easily the size of Shalong's entire torso. HMPH, Shalong mused. Toshiro blinked. Then immense pain struck him. There were 5 long, heavily bleeding, gouges in his body. Shalong had attacked in an instant and returned to where he was. Shit. He created some ice from his surroundings to try to staunch the bleeding, steadying himself to defend. He quickly did a spiritual scan of his surroundings. Looks like Kuchiki and Abarai are on their way. Toshiro's eyes widened as he brought his right wing to cover his side, just in time to block another slash from the deadly daggers that were Shalong's fingers. The wing broke, but regenerated quickly with Toshiro's concentration. He slashed at his attacker, only for Shalong to back away. Toshiro glanced down at his Fukutecho, Rangaku. She was lying on the ground, moderately hurt, trying to recover, while her opponent, a rather rotund Arrancar, stood and watched Shalong. Rangaku subtly held a cell phone in her hand. She looked up at him, a silent question in her eyes. Do we need the limit release? Toshiro gave the barest of nods as he locked eyes with her. Yeah, make the call. Quietly, Rangaku sent a text to Soul Society. Now we just have to hold on till then. You know, you really should be more wary of your surroundings, a familiar voice stated coldly. The fat Arrancar spun around to see a white-garbed man, with a spirit bow in hand and arrow right in his face. Ishida Ryu released the arrow directly into the Arrancar's eye, obliterating the Arrancar's head, sending blood and brain fragments flying before everything but blood dissipated into spirit particles. Do I know you? Rangaku asked. Ishida Ryu, Quincy, Ishida introduced himself. You probably know me as one of the Ryoka who infiltrated Soul Society not long ago. Matsumoto Rangaku, Fukutecho of Squad 10. No offense, but I thought Quincy's hate Shinigami. Yes, Ishida turned to Shalong, who was eyeing him with mild interest. But I hate hollows more. And the Arrancar are hollows with Shinigami powers. So you hate us most of all, Shalong completed dryly. Ishida merely looked coldly at the Arrancar, raising his bow once more. In a blink of an eye, the Quincy had fired a shot of Reiatsu. It was effortlessly deflected by Shalong, who rushed at Ishida with a speed surprising the young man. Regardless, Ishida managed to use Harenkyaku to evade, reappearing a distance behind from Shalong. With some concentration, he managed to fire several shots at once. This time, Ishida only narrowed his eyes when Shalong disappeared from view, and used Harenkyaku again, knowing that the Arrancar had used some high-speed technique to dash to Ishida's side. He was not a moment too soon, as Shalong's claws passed where the Quincy had been the barest of moments before. Fast, Ishida realized, and powerful too. He suppressed a smirk. This is like fighting a calmer Kurosaki. And Ishida knew how to fight Kurosaki Ichigo. He fired a powerful shot before using Harenkyaku to disappear and reappear around Shalong, firing arrows from as many directions as he could manage, anticipating how the Arrancar would dodge. Kurosaki Ichigo is a melee fighter, with only one distance attack. The same goes for this Arrancar. If I can keep the range too far for him to strike, then I've won. You seem to have some skill, Shalong admitted carelessly, using Sonido to evade a tricky spot where Ishida had cut off most avenues of escaping. As you are a ranged fighter, you naturally have some advantage over me. He used Sonido again, aiming to slash Ishida, who disappeared before he could be cut. The problem is, if a melee user is stronger than your arrows, he cut through another of Ishida's arrows. And just as fast as you, if not faster, he Sonido-ed right in front of Ishida, who used Harenkyaku once more. Shalong took chase, appearing right in front of a surprised Ishida. We enter melee combat. He cruelly sliced downwards with his right hand, cutting Ishida's left arm off as the Quincy activated Harenkyaku again. Ishida winced as he reappeared, reaching with his remaining arm into a sack of emergency medical supplies he kept around, just in case, and injected his shoulder with a medicine that would slow blood flow to the missing arm for about 20 minutes. Even so, he didn't have any melee weapons, and using his bow and arrow required both hands. As much as Ishida hated to admit it, he had lost. The best he could do right now was go find Inoue and get himself healed, then rejoin the fight. The last Quincy used Harenkyaku yet again, this time appearing beside Rangaku. Rangaku-san, you were staying with Inoue, right? Where is she? I haven't seen her yet. I was about to knock on her door when the Arrancar arrived, and we lured it away. I imagine she's still back at her place, Rangaku replied, surprised at the question. Why? She has extraordinary healing abilities, Ishida replied. Think you can handle the fight until we can tag team him? The Arrancar watched, only to be caught by complete surprise to feel an icy cold Zanpakudo stab into and through his neck. Did you forget, Arrancar? Toshiro asked, his voice as frigid as the Antarctic. I am your opponent. With that, he slashed out, severing Shalong's head from his neck. Renji and Rukia appeared at that moment, just in time to see Shalong die. Looks like you didn't need our help after all, Renji muttered. Your help would have been appreciated, if you had gotten here before Ishida or you, Toshiro stated, releasing his bankai, and suddenly spurting blood from his old wounds, the ones he'd taken and covered with ice previously in the fight. He fell silently from the sky, only to be caught by Rangaku. Quincy-san, please take us to Inoue-san. Matsumoto Rangaku pleaded. Follow me, Ishida ordered, leaping into the air towards Inoue Orihime's house. The Shinigami followed. Ishida, Rukia gasped. Your arm. My arm will be restored by Inoue, Ishida reassured her. Besides, I have already mostly stopped the bleeding. I am fine, though I will not be for long. Beep beep. Rangaku's cell phone rang. Your request for limit release has been approved. Rangaku carefully shifted her captain to her shoulder as they ran, took out the cell phone, flipped it open, and roared into the earpiece. You're too late. We had to get one of the Ryoka to bail us out. Then you really didn't need the release, now did you? An oily voice stated. Damn you, Kuritsuchi Taicho. She said the ending, Taicho, with extreme sarcasm. Now, Matsumoto-san, there's no need for profanity, Kuritsuchi Mayuri admonished. Everyone's still alive, aren't they? No thanks to you, Rangaku spat before hanging up. Everyone landed on the road outside Inoue's house. Unsurprisingly, she was waiting for them, having sensed them coming. Everyone who's injured, lie down, Inoue ordered gently. As soon as Rangaku set Toshiro down, and Ishida lay down next to him, Inoue brought her hands to her hairpins. Soden Kishun. 2 lights flew out from her hairpins, settling on opposite sides of the wounded. Inoue frowned in concentration as she carefully rejected Toshiro's injuries, and restored Ishida's arm and blood. She took a deep breath and released when she was done, letting her fairies return to her hairpins. There, they should be fine now. Ishida nodded, getting up and stretching his arm. Thanks, Orihime. Just as good as the original. Her powers are unreal. It was no problem. Are you? Inoue replied with a smile. What about Taicho? Rangaku asked worriedly. Inoue turned her smile to the big-breasted woman. Don't worry, Rangaku-san. He's been healed, he just needs some rest to recover his Reiatsu. I hate to impose, but I suppose I have no choice. Do you mind if we stay here for the time being? Rangaku asked. We're on a mission from Soul Society. Sure, Inoue chirped. It'll be great to have a couple of guests. You better stay ready for more, Ishida warned. There are more fights going on. Inoue's expression sobered. I know, Kurosaki-kun is strong, and has his special self-healing technique. Would you mind checking on the others before you go to him? She, too, was hesitant to reveal the nature of Ichigo's hollow powers to members of the Gote 13. Ryu nodded without hesitation, crouching and then disappearing through the Quincy high-speed technique. Meanwhile, crash. Ichigo had quickly grown used to the increased speed of his bankai and kept on the offensive, leaving Grimmjow to block and counterattack as best he could. He and Grimmjow had been fighting up close and personal for several minutes now, and to his consternation, Grimmjow had been blocking and fighting with his bare hands. Grimmjow grimaced as he was forced once again blocked his opponent's vicious slash with his arm, leaving a small cut as the Espada lunged forward to try to strike a punishing blow into Ichigo's abdomen, only for Ichigo to disappear using Shunpo. I never thought I'd fight someone who was as fast as me, Grimmjow complimented, using Sonito to appear behind Ichigo, his hand striking forward to smack the orange-haired Shinigami's head for a spin. Ichigo dodged to the side, spinning with a smirk. Is this the best an Espada has to offer? He taunted as he swung Tensa Zangetsu. His slowly developing Reiatsu sense alerted him to a severe drop of hollow Reiatsu in the town, and his smirk grew into a smug smile. Oh, would you look at that? Most if not all of your subordinates are dead. Grimmjow gave a manic grin. Who cares about them? They were weak, and gave up the journey for Vasto Lord. We hollows aren't like you weak Shinigami. We always look out for number one, first and foremost. He parried a slash and retaliated with a kick, which was deflected by Ichigo's left hand. Ichigo jumped back, and predictably, Grimmjow followed. With a smirk, the Shinigami swung Tensa Zangetsu down with both hands, bellowing, "Getsuga Tenshou." Grimmjow was too close to dodge, and he didn't have enough time to counter. All he could do was block. He threw his arms to cover his face as the black crescent of destructive energy struck him. He silently began charging a Sero. Ichigo, wanting to completely surprise his enemy, rushed in and slammed Tensa Zangetsu, another Getsuga already charged, onto the Getsuga Tenshou that Grimmjow was struggling with. Now, Grimmjow twisted his hand, a blue orb held in his palm, his blue eyes narrowed. Sero. The highly concentrated beam of light blue energy punched through a portion of Ichigo's Getsuga Tenshou and caught the Shinigami unaware as he was hit in the chest. He jumped back and fell to one knee in midair, still supported by the platform of Reiatsu that kept him up in the air with Grimmjow. Part of Ichigo's coat had been destroyed, and his upper torso was burned quite badly, with some blisters already forming. Son of a bitch, that hurt. I'm just glad my Getsuga took some of the blow for me. However, Grimmjow did not emerge completely unscathed either. He had been hit dead on by the Getsuga Tenshou, which had been boosted by Tensa Zangetsu for an admittedly short duration. His forearms had been deeply sliced and burned in several places from the nature of the Getsuga Tenshou, and even then some of the blast had hit his chest, burning both him and destroying part of his uniform. His arms hurt quite a bit to move, much to his displeasure. I'll need a day or two of rest to heal this up, or use my resurrection. Well, fuck, you're better than I thought, Shinigami. Ichigo straightened, gripping his sword tightly. So are you, he admitted. He hasn't gone resurrection yet. If he does, I'll need to bring out the mask. I wasn't expecting to need it so soon. He scowled. But I'll never get a better chance to kill him. He's away from Hueco Mundo, so he's weaker than he normally would be, and I've already injured him. Every Arrancar we kill decreases Aizen's forces. Ishida appeared in a burst of Harenkyaku then, bow in hand. Kurosaki. Ishida, Ichigo greeted. Be careful. This guy's speed and strength matches my Bankai, and he still hasn't used his resurrection. I'd stay away if I were you. The Quincy's eyes widened. Even I can't keep up with that, especially after the training Kurosaki's been doing. Very well, Kurosaki. He jumped back, well out of the way of any possible blast zone. That's better. One-on-one's always been more my style, Grimmjow said with a smirk as he slowly drew his sword. Ichigo tensed. Grimmjow struck him as a primarily hand-to-hand fighter, and Ulquiorra had said that hollow powers were primarily stored in Arrancar's Zanpakuto. He's gonna use resurrection. You sure you should be doing that here? Ichigo asked, stalling for time. A sudden brainwave hit him. If Ulquiorra came and retrieved Yammy, then this attack probably wasn't sanctioned by Aizen. He wouldn't cross Aizen unless he knew he was safe. I mean, surely your master Aizen or his subordinates will be upset knowing that you came on your own. How do you know I didn't come on his orders? Grimmjow bluffed. Ichigo laughed. The attack, it wasn't planned out. If you had really wanted to kill us all, you would have picked us off one by one before we could regroup, slaughtering us with overwhelming power of multiple Arrancar. The way you did this is something like I would have done, going half-cocked and unprepared. I mean, look at you. Your subordinates are all dead. There's only poor little you, against me, my friends, and all the Shinigami in this area when my friend heals them up. Grimmjow's scowl rivaled Ichigo's trademarked one. Shut up. Prepare to see my true form, Kurosaki Ichigo. Grimmjow moved quickly, drawing his sword across his body with his right arm, and bringing his left arm down to rake his nails across it. Ichigo tensed his hand, prepared to call out his hollow mask. His fingertips began to emit small black tendrils of the sinister Reiatsu, too small for any but Ishida to detect. You know, unleashing your resurrection will only alert your masters of your transgression. Ichigo taunted. After all, I doubt that they wouldn't detect a rise in your hollow Reiatsu, when in your unreleased state you can match Mabankai. They can't beat me, I'm king. Grimmjow argued, his anger getting the best of him. As that's so, Ichigo asked sarcastically, then what number Espada did you say you were? The sexta Espada. In other words, you're the sixth Espada. Meaning there are 5 others who are stronger than you, not including Aizen. You, king, ha. He laughed derisively. King of what? Your subordinates. They're dead. King of yourself. You're a follower of Aizen. You're king of nothing. I've gotten stronger since I got that rank, Grimmjow growled, gnashing his teeth together, his fingers tense as they ground slowly on his Zanpakudo. I'm on the same level as Ulquiorra, the Quattro Espada. Then why haven't you fought him for the rank? Ichigo challenged. Because Aizen forbids it, Grimmjow answered angrily. And even a king needs to know his limits, so he can surpass them and eventually kill those stronger than him. And what makes you think Aizen won't kill you when he realizes you're approaching his power? Ichigo demanded. After all, he fancies himself a king too, and kings put down insurrections. He grinned. And then you'll never become Vasto Lord. Grimmjow snapped, letting his Reiatsu flare. Grind, Pantera, he screamed in rage. A teal Reiatsu flashed, almost blinding Ichigo. When he blinked, he had just enough time to see the changed form of Grimmjow before the Arrancar attacked. Grimmjow's blue hair had lightened slightly, and lengthened to his knees. His body had grown even slimmer and lither, and now bore a white form-fitting type of armor. Grimmjow's mask fragment had changed as well. It was no longer on his jaw, but now appeared as a sort of crown. The Arrancar had also grown a thin, whip-like tail, and his forearms had grown wickedly curved blades reaching up towards his shoulders. Worst of all, Grimmjow was completely healed. Oh fuck. Ichigo did his best to shunpo out of the way, but even then Grimmjow's now black hands and feet were acting like claws, and managed to dig deeply into Ichigo's side. Trying not to wince at the pain, Ichigo wasted no time and brought his left hand across his face and summoned his hollow mask. And my time starts now, he thought to himself. You're not the only one who can power up, Catman, Ichigo taunted before flashing out of sight. Grimmjow blinked, before his body reacted to an incoming blow that he was pressed to match. Blocking the strike with one of his claws, Grimmjow tried to slash him with the blades on his right arm, only for Ichigo to flash out of sight again and strike from the other side. Grimmjow used Sonido then to completely evade Ichigo's slash, instead appearing behind Ichigo and viciously slashing Ichigo's back, ripping the rest of Ichigo's coat off of him. Barely feeling the pain and already sending some of his immense Reiatsu to his injuries, Ichigo used the momentum Grimmjow had given him and whirled, giving another vicious-looking slash. Grimmjow caught it with his bare hand, his hierro allowing him to do so with only small cuts. Of course, he had reinforced his hierro from his own pool of Reiatsu, but he was hardly going to tell Ichigo that. Do you see now? Grimmjow demanded. I am king. Ichigo's hollow-like amber eyes glowed with determination. Getsuga Tenshou. Tensa Zangetsu was now surrounded by the enormous destructive power of Ichigo's hollow mask-enhanced attack, and Grimmjow was caught unprepared. Getsuga Tenshou, combined with the empowered Ichigo's added force using Tensa Zangetsu directly, proved to be too much for even Grimmjow's enhanced hierro to combat entirely, and the Arrancar's left-hand claw was sliced badly, cutting through the palm and into the arm itself. His hand was now useless until it could be healed. Grimmjow let out a yell of pain even as he retaliated with cruel kick to Ichigo's ribs. Damn it, I forgot he had that attack. But damn, this Shinigami. No, not Shinigami. Grimmjow leapt back with narrowed eyes to narrowly dodge yet another slash. His Reiatsu feels like a hollow's too. Yet he was undeniably Shinigami before he put on that mask. What are you? Grimmjow demanded. You are Shinigami, but you feel like a hollow. Ichigo growled as he took the chance at a brief reprieve to direct more Reiatsu to his ribs. Grimmjow had broken at least 2 in that kick. His hollow mask somehow dulled the pain normally, but he knew it would impact his fighting if the ribs weren't healed and quickly. Me? He asked, his dually layered voice sounding even more dangerous and creepy than usual. I am your executioner. Not today, a new voice sounded. Both Grimmjow and Ichigo turned to see Tosen Kanami, one of the Shinigami captains that had betrayed Soul Society with Aizen, step out of a garganta, which closed behind him. Tosen was a tall, thin, black man, dressed similarly to the Arrancar uniform, and he wore a translucent silver visor over his pupil-less eyes. He had let his brown hair fall down and behind him since his time in Soul Society, and he did not look pleased. Grimmjow, return to Hueco Mundo. Aizen has heard of this pathetic jaunt. Tosen ordered firmly with a frown of distaste. Fuck you, Tosen. This Shinigami has wounded me in my released form. He must die. Grimmjow howled. Tosen looked at Ichigo with a new light. To be able to fight on even grounds with the Sexta Espada's released form by himself, then he is strong. Even so, he will die if he attempts to fight Aizen-sama. Now return to Hueco Mundo. Perhaps the intelligence you've gathered here today will stay Aizen-sama's hand. You should be more worried about yourself, traitor. Ishida had used Harenkyaku to appear right behind Tosen, his most powerful arrow yet cocked and ready. He released, only for the ex-captain to have spun and blocked with his unreleased Zanpakuto. Fuck, he's fast. Ishida used Harenkyaku again, barely escaping from Tosen's retaliatory strike. Ichigo took advantage of the blatant opportunity and used Shunpo, trying to stab Tosen with his hollow mask enhanced speed and power. Grimmjow, however, blocked his path. Your fight is with me. Grimmjow growled. Fine then. Ishida, think you can handle the other guy? Ishida pushed up his glasses, readying his bow and cocking back another spirit arrow. I'm more than willing to try. Tosen shook his head. You are all going to die regardless of this fight. There is no justice in pointless slaughter. He held his sword up. Cry, Suzumushi. Ishida's eyes widened as his quickly used Harenkyaku to retreat out of range of the familiar attack. Trusting Ishida's judgment, Ichigo quickly did the same, appearing at Ishida's side. Why'd you jump back? Ichigo questioned, not seeing anything. Some sort of sound attack, Ishida replied, eyebrows furrowed in thought. He used it against me back in Soul Society, and it knocked me out instantly. I remember it being a very high-pitched sound, barely within my hearing range. Sounds at certain pitches can do odd things to a person's body. I imagine that the sound was at the right frequency and volume to mess with your eardrums and brain, causing unconsciousness, Ichigo deduced. Judging from how it hasn't hit us, it must have a range limit. Yes, that makes sense. The sound will lose energy as it travels in the air, thereby changing the frequency and decibel level, Ishida concurred. I would surmise that the range depends on how much Reiatsu he puts into the attack. However, since sound is a wave, the drain must be exponential, so as long as we keep our distance, we should remain unaffected. I wonder how he isn't affected by his own attack. Indeed, Tosen confirmed. An excellent analysis. I must admit, I didn't expect you to figure it out so quickly. You initially seemed like battle-loving fools like Grimmjow here, and Kenpachi. He picked up the now unconscious Grimmjow, who hadn't known of Tosen's power and therefore hadn't bothered to try to evade. I admit that if I were to try to fight the two of you together, there is a good chance I would lose. It is only logical that I then retreat. A garganta opened behind him, and began to step into it. Oh no you don't, Ichigo roared, dashing with all the speed of his hollowified Bankai form. Getsuga Tenshou. At the same time, Ishida fired another arrow right behind Ichigo's attack, aimed a little off-center so Tosen wouldn't anticipate its true path. Tosen blocked the Getsuga with some effort with his Zanpakuto, and deflected the arrow with his left hand. He merely smiled. I make up for my blindness with my ability to sense Reiatsu. I have, in effect, 360-degree vision. Until next time. The garganta closed then. Frustrated, Ichigo fed more hollow Reiatsu to his wounds, making sure he was fully recovered before he removed and crushed his mask. Well, we've repelled this invasion, and now I know I'm about the equal of the Sexta Espada if we both go all out, Ichigo muttered. No you're not, Ishida countered. You didn't fight in Hueco Mundo, where his powers are amplified. Ichigo blinked and scowled. You're forgetting, Ishida, that we're playing on our home field, and we never have to leave it. They are the ones who have to invade us, not the other way around. Perhaps, Ishida conceded, but we should not underestimate them. You fought the 6th Espada to a near draw, but that means there are 5 Espada more, not including Aizen and his 2 Shinigami subordinates. They also have the advantage of being able to create more Arrancar than we can recruit others, and Soul Society is unlikely to send more reinforcements. They need to protect their own turf. The next time they invade, they'll send the 5th or higher Espada, Ichigo realized. And we are so few, it's almost impossible for us to be on watch 24/7, he continued the thought soberly. I could do it, Hollow Ichigo volunteered. All I would need is control of your body. Hollows rarely need sleep, and you know just as well as I do that I'm better with Zangetsu. His host scowled harder. No, you'd immediately take the opportunity to become king, and force me to be the horse. Maybe you're right, maybe not. You'll never know unless you let me. Hollow Ichigo's mocking laughter echoed as he retreated from Ichigo's consciousness. Ichigo brutally quashed the sudden doubts. We don't need to be on watch all the time, he corrected himself. I have my badge and the Shinigami have their cell phones. Right, Ishida nodded, wondering why Ichigo's scowl had grown. After a few moments, he shook his head. We should return to Orihime. Ichigo took a few moments to gaze at where the Garganta had been, lost in thought. Yeah, the two of them disappeared as they used their respective high-speed techniques. Shortly thereafter, they met up with Inoue, who smiled. Everyone's doing just fine now, she informed them. Hitsugaya Taicho is resting, having exhausted himself. Rangaku-san, Rukia-chan, and Renji-kun are with him, waiting to talk to you. Madarame-san was here for a short while, but after he was healed he and Yumashika-san left. They apparently are staying with Keigo. Well, that's weird, wonder how they managed that. Ichigo mused. Anything else to report, Inoue? Inoue shook her head. No, suppose I should go see the others then. You wanna come too, Ishida? I suppose I should, in order to be completely informed of what's going on, Ishida drawled, pushing up his glasses a bit, making them glint and become opaque. All right, Inoue, mind restoring my clothes? Inoue blushed, only just realizing that Ichigo's torso was bare. I'm seeing you too often like this, she scolded. I'm getting used to seeing you shirtless. Soden Keshun. Ichigo merely shrugged as he felt his Bankai outfit restore itself. Sorry, he offered. Don't be, I know it's not your fault, Inoue replied softly, the restoration complete. Wait in the living room, I'll get the others. Ichigo and Ishida glanced at each other and sat down on opposite sides of the nearby couch. A bare minute later, the Shinigami, a tired-looking Tushiro among them, came out. Matsumoto. Tushiro called out, his normally commanding voice sounding more his age as he fought his fatigue. He failed to hold back a yawn, which had both Rangaku and Inoue fighting not to squeal and glomp him for his cuteness. Just tell me what's going on. Who healed me? Inoue Orihime did, Taicho, Rangaku replied, all business. As for what's going on, having been your Fukuteicho for so long I know that you prefer to work out the plan if any complications hit. Tushiro nodded. Yes, and this definitely qualifies. A Taicho and his Fukuteicho were unable to defeat even the lower-level Arrancar without releasing our limiters, or calling for aid. Limiters? Ichigo questioned. Every Fukuteicho and Taicho have limiters put on them when they enter the human world, Renji answered. It's to keep us from unnecessarily affecting people with our Reiatsu. It essentially locks away 80% of our power. It can be released in times of need, but if we do it without permission from Soul Society, then it can be grounds for prison term, Rangaku continued. Well, even prison term's better than dying, Ishida reasoned. Why didn't you release when you were so severely injured? It was broad daylight, and my power actively causes snowstorms when I'm in Bankai, Tushiro told him deadpan. I need Soul Society to create a barrier around me while I'm in human world to keep my Reiatsu from affecting the weather. Alerting the general populace about Shinigami existence is grounds for execution. Let's move on, Ichigo suggested. How about we compare notes first, to see what the overall skill level was of the Arrancar? Rukia nodded. I faced numero 15, Yilfort Grants. He was strong in body, but I discovered his weakness through a lucky break early on and killed him. Even that would have been better than the one I got, Renji muttered. I got an Arrancar named D. Roy. Numero 16. He was an unseated officer in power level. He was definitely a subordinate. I barely had to use my Shikai. My opponent was numero 14. I didn't get his name. He was about 3rd seat or so in power, and I was unable to defeat him in my limited state. He never had the chance to release his Zanpakuto, so I don't know where his true power was. Rangaku summarized with a small blush of embarrassment. Everyone turned to Tushiro. Numero 11, Shalong Kuafang. He was approximately Fukuteicho level before his release. After it he was low Taicho level, he stated emotionlessly. Is that a small difference in power by your standards? Inoue questioned. Rukia shook her head. No, seated officers typically have minor variations in power, a slow climb. The two big steps are the Fukuteicho and Taicho levels. Fukuteicho typically have their Shikai, which is better than one without by about 3 or 4 times. A requirement of becoming a Taicho is to achieve Bankai, which increases a Shinigami's power between 5 to 10 times from their Shikai, usually closer to 10 times. A drastic increase indeed, Ishida murmured. What about you, Kurosaki? Tushiro inquired. Ichigo sighed. Espada 6, Grimmjow Jagerjackez. He was their leader, and was incredibly strong, especially after he released. There was a hush as the others took in that he'd faced such a high-level Espada already. Did you manage to kill him? Renji asked after a minute. Ichigo shook his head negatively. No, I might have managed eventually, but a Shinigami named Tosen interrupted the fight, knocked him out with his Shikai attack, and took him away. How strong was the Espada? Tushiro demanded. Let me put it this way. I was in Bankai, with no limiters, and he was keeping up without releasing, Ichigo informed him. Considering that before my recent training, I managed to defeat Kuchiki Byakuya. Mid-Taicho level, Rangaku breathed. How powerful was he after his release? Ichigo shook his head. He made me look like I was no faster than a human child. And he was strong, very strong. How did you keep up? Tushiro questioned with narrowed eyes. You did say you might have won eventually, had there been no interference. I have my secrets, Ichigo said evasively. Let's just say it's a power none of you have. After all, I don't see you just giving out the powers and weaknesses of your Shikai and Bankai, Tushiro. It's Hitsugaya Taicho, Ichigo, you're among friends, Rukia coaxed. Besides, you're not really part of the Gote 13. Yamamoto Saotaicho can't touch you, and even if he wanted to, you've got friends in high and low places. Ichigo narrowed his eyes at Tushiro, who stared right back. It was a contest of wills. I want your word as a Shinigami Taicho that you will not tell anyone unless I give you permission. Kurosaki, Rangaku exclaimed, scandalized. Do you know what you are asking of me, Kurosaki Ichigo? Tushiro asked softly, yet coolly. The fact that you are asking at all tells me that this is a secret that the Gote 13 should know. No offense to you, Tushiro. A tick formed on Tushiro's forehead. Damn it, it's Hitsugaya Taicho. Ichigo focused his fierce gaze at Tushiro. But I can't trust any society whose leaders would execute a young woman for an offense that should have been no more than a few months in prison and a year of supervision. He pointedly glanced at Rukia. Or one whose justice system is apparently so fucked up that only the damned nobles have any sway in their decisions. He positively glared at Tushiro. Or one who would have executed several Shinigami who had been nothing but loyal, but had received hollow powers against their will from one of Aizen's experiments, and then completely ignored the scapegoat's claim of innocence. Tushiro's eyes widened in surprise. How do you have that information? I've met the scapegoat, and he gave me the story. Confirmed it later with the victims, Ichigo said shortly. Given that Yamamoto and the Central 46 were in charge back then too, I'd say not much has changed. Tell me, Tushiro, has the active ruling body in Soul Society sent an apology to Urahara Kazuki for accusing and banishing him for Aizen's traitorous actions now that they know the truth? Tushiro didn't bother reminding Ichigo of his preferred form of address. No, he said quietly. Ichigo got up and pressed his advantage. And have they repealed the ruling from 100 years ago and invited the Shinigami they would have executed back into their midst? Why would they? Toshiro asked, confused. Didn't they just become hollows? No, Ichigo replied with a scowl. They stayed Shinigami, but gained the ability to draw on their hollow powers and enhance their existing skills. Imagine your Bankai, enhanced to be, say, 5 times stronger just by putting on the mask of what your hollow self would have been. You could take it off any time you wanted. Toshiro's eyes widened. That's strong. More, Ichigo told him. They've had 100 years to get stronger and learn how to use hollow-specific powers, like Sero. Oh dear, Rangaku said weakly as she leaned back heavily in her chair. So, they refused to admit that they were wrong, even after the Central 46 has been assassinated by the one they exonerated. Ichigo sat back down. So if word got out just what my secret power was, Soul Society might tolerate me long enough to put down Aizen, but guess who would be next? Especially since I'm still a human being, living my life here. He scoffed. Soul Society might try to tolerate the existence of a human who could defeat some of their best Shinigami, since humans live for such a short term anyway compared to you. But a human who could defeat some of their best Shinigami, and then have an additional power to push himself beyond Taicho level. They'd assassinate me, or wear me down, or seal up my powers given the slightest excuse, because they'd be afraid I would come into their town and do the same damn thing. Preemptive strike my ass, and then to top things off, they'd try to recruit my power for the Gote 13. None of the Shinigami there said anything. They'd been around long enough to know that Ichigo's words were the truth. Toshiro looked away. Then don't tell me. What I don't know can't hurt you. Taicho, Rangaku exclaimed in surprise. No, Matsumoto, Toshiro ordered with as much authority as he could. Can you not already guess? You have a brain, use it. How would Kurosaki know of and meet the Shinigami with hollow powers? That shut Rangaku up. I see. Toshiro sighed, then straightened. The report to Soul Society will simply state you managed to evade the Espada's Resurrección form long enough for Tosen to arrive and knock him out, returning to Hueco Mundo. Thank you, Hitsugaya Taicho, Ichigo said with genuine appreciation. Toshiro's eyes widened for a split second. I am not sure I wish to be known as one of Soul Society's Taicho by someone who does not respect them with valid reason, he said softly. You may call me Hitsugaya, or Toshiro-san if you must. Ichigo smirked. As you wish, Toshiro. It's Hitsugaya or Toshiro-san. The white-haired shrimp barked out. Ichigo held back a chuckle. Is there anything else we need to go over? Toshiro nodded. Defense plans. I think I can safely say that with his unnamed power, he glanced at Matsumoto, who merely nodded. And his lack of a limiter, Kurosaki here is the most efficient defender at the moment, with the Quincy Ishida as backup. Are you two in agreement with this? Ichigo and Ishida glanced at each other. In all honesty, we're pretty evenly matched normally, Ichigo confessed reluctantly. I've got brawn, but he's got the smarts to pull off some very impressive tactics, and I don't think we've seen even half the bag of Quincy tricks he's got. Given that I need to get out of my body first to be even half as effective as I was today, Ishida is your go-to guy. Ishida snorted bitterly. Don't even try it, Kurosaki. That Espada would have made mincemeat of me, and you were keeping up when you had that power of yours active. It doesn't take you but a second to leave your body with your badge or con around. I know when I'm beaten. Ichigo's brow creased as he frowned. Ishida. The Quincy glared at him. Don't think it'll stay this way for long, Kurosaki. I only got my powers back recently, and I'm catching up faster than you think. You had better work hard to stay ahead. That's more like it, Ichigo smirked. Bring it. He was promptly smacked by Rukia. Focus, Ichigo. Now is not the time for your stupid competitions. Ichigo was sorely tempted to start a fight with her, but gathered himself and turned his attention back to Toshiro. Right then, the Taicho continued. In the event of another invasion, we shall divide up the forces. Inoue-san, you are our best healer at the moment, so you need to stay safe. Kuchiki-san, you shall guard her. Rukia nodded swiftly. But Hitsugaya-san, Inoue protested. Ishida shook his head. Orihime, you can handle yourself against one opponent at a time, yes, but these Arrancar are fast. You heard Kurosaki, some are even faster than his Bankai mode in Shinigami form. And let's face it, none of us is that fast, not even me when I'm using Harenkyaku. We need you to be able to heal us when we get hurt. Inoue reluctantly nodded, seeing the logic. I'm sorry for interrupting, Hitsugaya-san. Toshiro nodded. Kurosaki, Ishida-san, you two are the heavy hitters. I need you to be the initial line of defense and judge whether we need to release our limiters to aid you. Ichigo nodded. Got it. The child-appearing Taicho turned to Rangaku and Renji, who had been oddly quiet. The three of us are to handle any stragglers. Understood. Hitsugaya Taicho, Renji accepted seriously. Yumashika-san and Madarame-san are 11th Division members. They'll look for the best fight regardless of what I tell them, Toshiro stated with a sigh. Also, in the event of the appearance of an Espada, immediately request a limit release. I have something to add to that, Ichigo volunteered. The Espada known as Yammy Realgo, very large man, muscle-bound, has ridges on his forehead and a long thin black ponytail, is the weakest of the Espada prior to release, but the strongest after he does. This comes from the mouth of Espada 4, Ulquiorra cipher. I have fought him prior to release, and can confirm that he can be defeated in my Shikai state. Anything else? Toshiro pressed. Ishida nodded, picking up where Ichigo left off. Ulquiorra has expressed an interest in switching sides should Yammy be defeated in his Resurrection form. That would be damn useful. Renji commented in awe. If he's Espada 4, he's stronger than that Grimmjow guy that Ichigo fought on even grounds with. Someone of that level defecting to our side would be priceless. The problem with that is Soul Society's attitude towards Hollows and Arrancar, Rukia reminded pensively. No Espada will turn to our side if they feel they will just be assassinated afterwards for their trouble. Who says Soul Society has to know? Inoue suggested, somewhat timidly. Ichigo nodded at her. Hide him out in Hueco Mundo all the time. Could work, but risky. Too much risk of the rest of Aizen's forces discovering him. You're not thinking clearly, Kurosaki, Ishida criticized. Have him spy on Aizen. Ichigo gave him a look that clearly communicated the idea of, what the hell are you thinking? He then chose to reinforce it. Ishida, what the hell are you smoking? Did you forget Aizen's power? Aizen's hypnosis powers are reinforced every time the victim sees him release his Zanpakuto. I wouldn't put it past him to have originally done that to begin with to get the Arrancar to follow him. Toshiro frowned. I doubt that he could do that, he stated coolly. If that were indeed possible, he would have used it on Soul Society and saved himself the trouble of betraying us all. His Reiatsu isn't infinite, Renji pointed out. No one's is. Perhaps it's his Bankai power, but it requires too much concentration and Reiatsu to use for more than a small group of people. The Espada, Ichigo concluded with a nod. Everyone else wouldn't dare argue, as the Espada are the strongest around, save the reclusive Vasto Lord. That's hollow nature. That still doesn't make sense, Rukia pointed out. If that were the case, he could have easily done it to the Shinigami Taicho, or even just Yamamoto Sao Taicho. Regardless, Kurosaki does have a point, Ishida admitted. Aizen's hypnosis could allow him to routinely check to make sure no one has betrayed him. It is entirely possible that this is not the first set of Espada. It doesn't matter, Rangaku countered. It's not the previous Espada we have to deal with, it's the current one. Toshiro coughed to get everyone's attention. We'll drop the potential defection of Ulquiorra cipher for now, he ordered. Everyone knows procedure now. To review, Ishida and Kurosaki are our first line of defense, and will take the strongest of invaders. Abarai, Matsumoto and myself are the next line, with our limiters. Kuchiki and Inoue are the back lines, the healers. If an Espada appears, make the call to release limiters. I can't make the call, Ichigo alerted him. I don't have one of your cell phones. Ishida markedly pushed up his glasses as he stared. Besides, even if we did, we would not be able to afford the time to ask for the limiter release. Against an Espada, all our efforts would be towards fighting and killing him. Toshiro coughed once. I was referring to myself, Matsumoto and Abarai. Ichigo shrugged. Whatever, I have places to be. Let me know when you plan to make the report, I want to be there, he finished with a very serious look in his eye before disappearing in a flash of shunpo. Not to sound like a copycat, but I have things to do, Ishida informed them, disappearing with his Harenkyaku technique. Ichigo reappeared at the Vizard warehouse and walked in with a serious look on his face. Seeing the expression, Shinji cocked his head at him. Ichigo. The orange-haired Vizard turned a hard look at the ex-Taicho. You know about the Arrancar invasion today? Yeah, so, Hiyori asked, not really interested. I fought on par with the Sexta Espada. That means there are 5 above him who are stronger than he is, Ichigo told them. I can't count on Soul Society, and my friends and I are not strong enough to take them all down. Evidence suggests that Aizen is going to sacrifice all of Karakura in order to do what he wants, which I can't let happen. I need to know, are you going to help me fight Aizen or not? Chapter 7. Prepare for War. The next day, Ichigo didn't bother going to school. Instead, he stared up at the ceiling from his bed, scowling as he thought about the Vizard. He'd not gotten a satisfactory answer to his question, which frustrated him to no end. Flashback. What do you mean, you haven't decided? Ichigo demanded incredulously. You must have known this was coming since Aizen forced you to transform into Vizard, and that was 100 years ago. In our defense, love began. It took us quite some time to figure out how to use our hollow powers. We were sure that Soul Society was going to come and try to execute us, Hiyori continued bitterly. Lisa set aside her perverted manga. We trained for decades, moving around the human world to stay hidden, she added matter-of-factly, though her tone also held notes of remembered weariness. We maintained contact with Urahara-san, who had elected to stay here in Karakura town. He provided frequent updates on the inner happenings of Soul Society, Kensai reported, military style. After we grew accustomed and comfortable using our hollow powers, it occurred to us that we weren't on Soul Society's list of priorities. Maybe they wrote us off. Thought we'd been eaten by hollows. Or perhaps we hid our existence too well, Rose murmured. Even if you spent a few decades training, you still would have had at least half a century, Ichigo pointed out in a low, non-threatening voice. What could have held your attention for so long? We had the opportunity to live as humans, Hachigan said simply. The human world is so rapidly changing, and there is so much to see. It proved too tempting for us to resist. We had lots and lots of fun, and there was always something new. Mashiro chirped. We spent time training. Yes, Shinji said with a sigh, but as Soul Society no longer seemed interested in us, we didn't bother with them. They deserve whatever they get, Hiyori scoffed. They kicked us out without even a fucking trial. I'm inclined to agree with that, to an extent, Ichigo conceded. Problem is, I've made some friends there, friends who have no idea the wrong their government has done to you. They are innocent of the Council of 46's crimes, or even those of Yamamoto. Are you asking us to save Soul Society, when they would rather eliminate us? Kensai inquired with narrowed eyes. Yes, no, I just don't know anymore, Ichigo admitted with a sigh. Listen, all I want, is to protect Karakura town. He gestured outside the warehouse. It's my home, with my family, and a lot of my friends. Won't you at least help with that? All you would have to do is play some defense if my friends and I are in over our heads. Shinji glanced around at the varying looks of his comrades. Looks like that decision needs to be discussed, Ichigo. I'm afraid that until we come to a decision, I'm going to have to ask you not to visit for a while. We'll contact you one way or another once we make that decision. You deserve that much for being one of us. Flashback end. Ichigo's scowl descended into a sigh. If I can't count on the Vizard, then I need to get stronger, and quickly. He sat up and focused, attempting to call forth Zangetsu's spiritual form. Instead, he got his hollow self. Hey King, Hollow Ichigo said, leaning against the wall and crossing his arms, his nigh-insane smile never wavering. What's up? Ichigo blinked, then sighed and put his head in his hands. I don't even know why I'm surprised anymore. Come on, you had to know it was gonna happen this way, Hollow Ichigo countered with a smirk. Zangetsu and I share the same spiritual body. Since I'm in control of that, I got brought out instead. So, why'd ya call me out? Not that I mind being out of your boring ass head. He glanced around. Nice place you got here. Bit small, though. Ichigo shrugged. It's home. As for why I called you out, I need to get stronger quickly. He paused, recalling how his mule-headed stubbornness in getting stronger by himself had almost cost him Zangetsu. We need to get stronger quickly, he corrected himself. We managed to fight the Sexta Espada to a draw. That means we have 5 more Arrancar above him, plus Yammy's Resurrection form. Well, King, the way I see it, ya got 3 ways, and each has a cost, Hollow Ichigo said seriously, losing the insane look. First, you could let me take over fully. You do that, you become a Hollow, we go to Hueco Mundo and kick some ass, do some evolution until you can reassert control. If you do get that control back, your masked form would be incredibly stronger. But it'd be much harder to suppress me, with our Hollow form having evolved. Ichigo frowned. That's an option, though not one I like. Hollow Ichigo grinned. Option 2. You figure out how to summon out my Zangetsu, and master dual wielding. If you can master using both in Bankai mode, then you'd be even faster and stronger than you are in your current Bankai, which should be enough to handle just about anything thrown in your way, especially when you toss in our mask. Downside is, it'll tear up my body as I use it until I condition my body for it, so it'd be good only for created opportunities to overwhelm my opponent. Since the Arrancar have their Hierro, I get the feeling that some of my battles are going to be a bit long and drawn out, Ichigo pointed out. Nevertheless, a good option, and one I'll work on. What's your third option? The bleached version of Ichigo shrugged. Use what you know. If you're not fast enough, make your opponent predictable. If you're not strong enough, make your opponent waste his energy until he's weak enough to be killed. He saw Ichigo's blank look and laughed. Create a new technique, dumbass, one that enhances your speed or strength, or creates a nifty effect that gives you an advantage. I swear, for the king of your inner world, you're certainly as slow as a peasant. You really should let me take over, I'd love to fight those strong opponents. Shut it, Ichigo growled. You'll take over if, and only if, you beat me in one of our fights. Until then, I'm king of my body. He narrowed his eyes. And I'll kick your ass as many times as it takes for you to get the picture. You will stay as my horse for as long as I exist. Bold words, King. Hollow Ichigo's maniacal grin belied his tone. He was clearly looking forward to the fight. Be ready to back it up. You only have a few days left before our next fight, and I expect to see a marked improvement from last time. With that final parting statement, he dissipated, back into Ichigo's inner world. Within Ichigo's closet, Rukia's eyes were wide. She'd heard from Byakuya Nisama that Ichigo had an inner hollow, and the orange-haired Shinigami had practically admitted it the previous night, but actually seeing a conversation between Ichigo and his hollow side had really made it sink in. Ichigo. Ichigo looked up. He had forgotten that Rukia was there, but wasn't worried that she had likely heard the whole conversation. She won't tell anyone. Yeah. Rukia swallowed. That was your hollow side just now. She received a solemn nod as an answer. And you have to fight it regularly to keep control of your body. Another nod. How many days until the next one? 4. Ichigo replied after a moment. After I beat him, he takes several days to recover, and I can speak to Zangetsu properly. He shook his head. I'm not sure I have enough time to wait that long, though. He fixed a serious look at his Shinigami friend. I'm not going to school anymore. I have more important things to worry about now. He dressed quickly, attaching his Shinigami badge to his belt, just in case. Where are you going, if not to school? Rukia asked sternly, trying to mask her inner worry. To train. Ichigo jumped out the window, landing on his feet easily, and softening the blow with some reiatsu to his legs. He took a moment to materialize spirit ribbons around him, and quickly located Renji's. Ichigo followed the thread with a sight akin to tunnel vision, his mind only on the goal. He'll make a good opponent. Fighting against him while I'm in human form will mean that he's stronger, and faster than I am. He picked up his pace. Not only will I gain valuable experience, but that should give me some good ideas on what sort of techniques I can create to make up the difference. Meanwhile, in Soul Society, Chad got up to continue his trek through the sectors of Rukongai. Yoruichi had offered to pull some strings to get her protege, Soifun, to use her power as the leader of the Onimitsukido, a special forces military group typically led by the Shihoin clan, of which Yoruichi was the heir to quickly locate Chad's grandfather, but the gentle giant had turned her down. I need to find him myself, Chad had said. The previous day, the duo had trekked through the first 10 districts of each cardinal direction, Chad quietly putting up posters asking about his grandfather and inquiring at the popular locations. They had set up camp when the sun set and Yoruichi spent a few hours training him. Flashback. Here's how it's going to work, the cat had begun. You're going to try to evade me. We will train until you can evade me 3 times in a row tonight. Chad's soul visible eye widened. He had heard of Yoruichi's title from Ichigo, goddess of flash. I can't use Shunpo, Chad confessed. How am I supposed to dodge someone famous for her sheer speed? Don't worry, Chad, I won't be using Shunpo, and my speed in this form is greatly limited. I have a bad feeling about this. The predatory smile on Yoruichi's face did nothing to soothe his worries. End flashback. Chad shuddered as he put up the next poster, recalling the previous night's many injuries. It had taken him a few hours, but he'd accidentally discovered a way of using his Reiatsu to increase his speed for short bursts, which made him just fast enough to avoid the speedy cat. Yoruichi confirmed that it wasn't Shunpo when he'd asked her about it. Chad was thinking about calling it Paso del Viento, or Step of the Wind. He again brought up his Reiatsu and, after a moment of concentration, managed to disappear and reappear at the next place to put up a poster. This was Yoruichi's training for the day. Flashback. Chad breathed hard, tired and weary, but finally having managed to evade the fearsome feline the required number of times for him to get some rest. However, he forced himself to pay attention to what his new sensei was saying. Now that you've discovered your high-speed technique, you need to make it come naturally, Yoruichi had ordered. So instead of walking or running, every time you need to move more than a meter, you are to use it, over and over, until you're proficient in moving short distances. Don't worry about me keeping up. Tonight, I'll start using Shunpo. I expect you to avoid me for 5 strikes this time. Yes, Yoruichi-sensei. Inside, Chad sighed, wondering if he'd get any good rest before leaving for his friends. End flashback. Chad shook his head, once more using his Paso del Viento to move at high speed towards his next destination, a bar. Excuse me, has anyone seen this man? He asked the bartender, holding up a picture. He has a rose tattoo on his left shoulder. Name? The bartender asked, bored. Oscar Joaquin de la Rosa. I know that name, a new voice piped up to Chad's left. The giant of a teenager turned and saw a grizzled middle-aged man, unshaven and slowly sipping his drink. Where, sir? Chad questioned as politely as he could. The man frowned. Who wants to know? I'm his grandson, Sato Yasutora, Chad informed him. He raised me when my parents died, and taught me a very valuable lesson when he was alive, and I need his guidance once more. The man lowered his head slightly, his eyes scanning Chad, searching for something. His frown deepened as he leaned back in his chair. What was this lesson? He asked. Chad recognized it as a test. He said that I had been gifted with strength, and he taught me to use my strength to protect others. The stranger nodded. That is his way, yes. All right then. I saw him in North District 56, protecting a hungry orphan child from being beaten for stealing a fruit. We talked for a while, and he told me he was heading further north. He was talking about possibly creating a safe haven for children there. I accompanied him till North District 62 or so before I realized I needed the piece of civilization closer to Seraiti. This was about a year or so ago. Chad bowed his head. Even in death, your will to protect is so strong. I thank you, sir. You have been most helpful. Before you go, the stranger interrupted. Tell me, what could you possibly need his guidance for? I find myself curious, as you seem to have learned his lesson well. Chad paused. I made a vow at my abuelo's death to only use my strength to defend others, and I have never once broken it. He raised his right hand and formed a fist. But now, in order to grow stronger, I need to find my will to attack, to enjoy fighting for its own sake as I once did, before my abuelo taught me how much more fulfilling it is to protect instead of crush those weaker than I. He shook his head. I fear I cannot reconcile my abuelo's teachings with a passion for violence. I need his wisdom. The stranger whistled. I can see why you need him. That is one devil of a problem. I wish you luck, Sato Yasutora. He took a long drink from his glass. Chad nodded. Good day. He turned and used Paso del Viento again to go outside the bar. Not surprisingly, Yoruichi was there, waiting in her cat form. Where to? She asked. North District 62, Chad responded strongly. Lead the way, Yoruichi-sensei. Yoruichi nodded, and the two flashed out of sight in tandem. Back in the living world, Ishida Ryu's customary frown deepened as he noticed Kurosaki's lack of attendance at school. Feeling out with his spiritual sixth sense, he could tell that Kurosaki was at Urahara's training. Ryu realized, something I should be doing. Why am I wasting time here? His eyes narrowed as he looked outside. Hollows, Arrancar could arrive at any moment. I'll be fighting for my life again soon. He sighed and gathered his books. It's not like I won't be studying in my breaks, he rationalized. And I'm one of the best in the school, despite my absences. Going somewhere, are you? The teacher asked with a frown on her face. Yes, Ryu nodded, continuing past the teacher. Just where do you think you're going? I have family business to attend to, the Quincy informed her. Not exactly a lie, my Quincy heritage is definitely related. I apologize for not letting you know before class. Whatever, Ryu, the teacher sighed. First Sato, then Ichigo, and now you. One of these days, I'm going to want to know what's going on. Ryu gave her a piercing look. Pray you never find out, he advised. You'd never sleep again, and with that, he turned swept from the room. The minute he was out of sight, he disappeared using Harenkyaku. Inoue Orihime's eyes widened as she sensed his high-speed technique. Well, I should get some training of my own in. Hey, Tatsuki, wanna spar later? Tatsuki, Orihime's best friend, grinned. You're on. In Hawako Mundo, Grimmjow kneeled before Aizen. It was time for his report. This ain't gonna turn out well, Grimmjow thought to himself. Grimmjow Jagerjackes, Aizen began, you invaded Karakura town with your Frashin yesterday. Why? Grimmjow knew that nothing but the truth would satisfy their leader. I wanted to fight Kurosaki Ichigo and destroy all resistance in the human world. I wanted to see if Ulquiorra's report was accurate. And your answer? Accurate to a point, Aizen-sama, Grimmjow stated bluntly. Kurosaki Ichigo has a weird power that allows him to boost his strength, speed and power by quite a lot while he's in Bankai, and has a very strong attack he calls Getsuga Tenshou. With these, the Shinigami was able to keep up with my Resurrection form. Ulquiorra's report held nothing regarding the Getsuga Tenshou, or the weird power-up. Aizen looked interested in Grimmjow's words. It appears that I may have to stay your punishment, he mused. Anything else? My Frashin are dead, Grimmjow added bluntly. The other Shinigami there killed them, but I wasn't there to see which Shinigami were there. I was a bit focused on Kurosaki. Very interesting, Aizen murmured. They must have sent at least one Taicho, they just weakened themselves further, spreading themselves thin. He paused for a moment. And you say that Kurosaki Ichigo was able to match your Resurrection form? Yes, Aizen-sama. Oh, how Grimmjow hated saying that bastard's name. One day, he swore, I'll rip your still beating heart from your chest and say, enjoy your stay in hell, Aizen-sama. Aizen took several seconds to consider. I had not expected Ichigo to progress so quickly. It is possible that his Bankai is responsible for his weird power, as Grimmjow put it, as it appears to be a primarily melee-oriented Zanpakuto. However, there is also a chance he has acquired hollow powers. This power of Kurosaki's, did it involve a mask of some sort? Grimmjow blinked. How did he know that? It did, Aizen-sama. Aizen chuckled. Oh you clever man, Urahara Kazuki. So, Kurosaki has acquired, and presumably begun mastering, his hollow powers. No matter. Kurosaki is still only at the level of my Sexta Espada. There are still several who can kill him if need be. If there is nothing else, leave me. I shall overlook your excursion, as you have brought me useful information. Thank you, Aizen-sama. Grimmjow got up to leave, a scowl upon his face. Aizen-sama, Tosen protested. He went against your direct orders. He should at least have some punishment. I feel that Grimmjow was merely overexcited in his loyalty to me, to take out all potential threats to my authority, Aizen demurred as Grimmjow left. As soon as the doors shut, and Aizen was assured of their privacy, he continued. Besides, he has developed a one-sided rivalry against Kurosaki Ichigo now, and he can only grow stronger from here. He will never be powerful enough to kill me, but he will certainly occupy and injure the Shinigami Taicho we fight, so we may perform the masterstroke. Tosen nodded, a frown on his face, but deferring to his master's judgment. Should we not attack Kurosaki then? He can only grow stronger. Perhaps. No, Aizen decided. The forces we would need to invade the human world and kill them all would be too great. The battle would destroy a large amount of Karakura town and kill a number of its citizens, whom I need to sacrifice for the king's key. Further, most of the Shinigami Taicho would then interfere, and it would cause our battle to begin before we are ready. He smiled again, a simple smile of a predator knowing he's won. Besides, time is on our side, my friend. We can take Ijukas from Hueco Mundo and create more Arrancar for our army, making effective soldiers quickly. The Shinigami, to be worth anything, need to train for many years. But what about the Haugyuku's deterioration? Tosen challenged quietly. We cannot create endless Arrancar. We won't need to, Aizen stated firmly, his smile remaining. Have faith, Konami. We won't attack Kurosaki Ichigo directly, but nothing stops us from attacking his friends, and therefore his morale. It is only a matter of who, and when, to strike. Stalking the halls, Grimmjow scowled. I need to grow faster, stronger. No Shinigami fights me and lives to tell the tale. He stormed out of Las Noches, into the open sands of Hueco Mundo, to go eat more Ijukas. Little did he know that Neutra, Espada 5, was watching with glee, and chose to follow at a distance. And now, the two great predators shall fight to the death, and determine who is stronger between them, Neutra murmured to himself excitedly, a bloodthirsty grin on his face as he stalked his prey. Back in the human world, Ichigo and Renji prepared to fight within Urahara's training basement. Bankai, Renji yelled, a plume of reiatsu and smoke covering him for a few moments. When it faded, his shoulders were covered in red fur, and he wielded a bone, the end fragment of his Bankai, a giant segmented bone snake whose head had a top of a red fur sticking out. Hahio Zabumaru, Renji announced the name of his Bankai. So, what do you think, Strawberry? It's impressive, Ichigo agreed, looking up and seeing the extremely large foe. But something of that size must make it difficult to maneuver. It would be, Renji admitted, but I've been working on my Shunpo to compensate. Now come on, Ichigo, let's fight. Ichigo grinned, calling out Zangetsu silently. All right, let's go. What? Renji asked, astonished. You want to fight me with only your Shikai, while you're in a Gigai? Ichigo frowned. This is my actual body, not just a Gigai. But yes I am. Ichigo, you do realize that unless you go Bankai, you don't have a chance of beating my Bankai in that body of yours? Renji questioned slowly. I don't know about that, Ichigo replied with a cocky smirk. I nearly beat one of the Espada with only my Shikai. Renji shook his head. You can't expect me to do this, Ichigo. Neither of us is good at healing techniques, and you know just as well as I do that Shinigami bodies are more durable. You can't even use your power to its full extent while you're stuck in there. I dare you to try using your most powerful move, right now. If you manage to seriously damage a segment of my Bankai, then I will concede. Ichigo nodded before performing a Reiatsu-enhanced jump and focusing his energy. Getsuga Tenshou, he cried, swinging his blade down onto one of the bone segments so Zangetsu and the blue Getsuga blast were both digging into the same spot. Yet, when it faded, the segment was hardly damaged at all. See what I mean? Renji asked pointedly as Ichigo landed on the ground unharmed. Now turn into a Shinigami and fight me. Ichigo sighed and slammed his badge against his chest, freeing his soul from his mortal body. Quickly moving it to a safer area, Ichigo returned to Renji, preparing his Zanpakudo. I'm not going to go Bankai, Ichigo insisted seriously. That's fine, Renji replied with a grin. I know you can do Shunpo, and you're stronger now. So let's go. He swung with his bone fragment, and Hahio Zabumaru roared as it lunged at Ichigo. Ichigo dodged easily, Shunpoing out of the way and towards Renji, who used Shunpo as well. Ichigo sensed Hahio Zabumaru coming at him from the side, and slammed Zangetsu against it, snake head against cleaver. Getsuga Tenshou. Instead of cutting through it like Ichigo had hoped, his Getsuga interacted with Renji's Reiatsu, which was running through his Bankai, holding the segments together. It caused an explosion, throwing Hahio Zabumaru's head back. However, the segment behind the head collided with Ichigo, the spike on it cutting deeply. After a few more minutes, it quickly became obvious to Ichigo that he was fighting a losing battle. Renji was almost as fast as Ichigo when it came to Shunpo. The redhead had obviously been practicing quite some time. Ichigo couldn't seem to damage Renji or Hahio Zabumaru. He was fast enough to avoid most of the damage, but not all of it. Think, Ichigo, think. Use what you know. Zangetsu's special ability is to absorb my Reiatsu, condense it, and release the power, magnifying my slash's strength, and is known as Getsuga Tenshou. It can only absorb and condense the Reiatsu if it's in the process of slashing, even if it's only cutting the air. A metaphorical light bulb went off. Wait, what if I have a longer slash? It'll absorb more of my Reiatsu, creating a stronger attack. But wait, how do I create a longer slash? Ichigo dodged yet another attack, and saw the white cloth at the end of Zangetsu flutter in his wake. He smirked. A circular loop has infinite length. Shunpo-ing far enough back that it would take a few seconds for Renji to attack. Ichigo gripped the white cloth at the base of the hilt with his right hand, and began to swing Zangetsu around his head, feeding his Zanpakudo his Reiatsu. To his immense satisfaction, he could feel it working. Ichigo could sense the growing Getsuga Tenshou within his blade. Ichigo gave Zangetsu one last spin before gripping a section of cloth lower down with his left hand, and using his right to throw Zangetsu straight at the now charging Hahio Zabumaru. Getsuga Tenshou. All of Zangetsu suddenly erupted in dark blue Reiatsu, appearing as though it were on fire. Ichigo fed Reiatsu to the cloth instinctively, allowing it to lengthen indefinitely for as long as Zangetsu could fly. To Renji's surprise, Zangetsu pierced through Hahio Zabumaru's head, dead center in the bone snake's forehead, upon which the Getsuga once more interacted with Renji's Reiatsu, the explosion halfway destroying the snake head. He called his Bankai back to circle around him protectively, as Ichigo pulled Zangetsu back into his hand. What the hell was that? Renji bellowed, pumping Reiatsu to repair the damage. My new technique, Ichigo replied with a smirk. Although, credit where it's due, I did get the inspiration from you, hollow me. Hey, see, not that hard to use Zangetsu like that, even for an idiot like you. Although I am surprised you remembered me doing that, what with you almost dying less than 3 minutes later. Hollow Ichigo taunted. Hey, I was facing off against a Shinigami Taicho. And to be fair, I almost killed him too. Cut me some slack. Meh, if I'd been in control, I would have just cut Kenpachi's head clean off instead of going for the shoulder, you fucking pansy. Almost killed him. Ha, I would have completely killed him. I wonder if that would have made me the new Taicho. Ichigo mused. Oi, Ichigo, head out of the clouds. Renji yelled, irritated at Ichigo's ignoring him. What were you thinking about anyway? My fight with Kenpachi, back when we were rescuing Rukia, Ichigo answered honestly before grinning. At least he could keep my attention while we fought, and he didn't even have Bankai, or know the name of his Zanpakudo. Renji's blood boiled with anger at the implication. Hahio Zabumaru, he bellowed, unleashing his Bankai once more upon Ichigo. That's more like it. Ichigo grinned, looking forward to the battle. My last attack was good, but the charge time is a big drawback. There's got to be another way to use the Getsuga. Wait, that big snake is very large and easy to predict, right? Can you think of a way to repeatedly hit him with Getsugas, one after another? Hollow Ichigo suggested. How fast are we talking here? As in, non-stop, no ability to retreat. Taking full advantage of our reserves. Ichigo frowned as he used a silent Getsuga Tenshou, and therefore slightly weaker than normal, to deflect Hahio Zabumaru's next attack, Shunpo-ing away. He began spinning Zangetsu again to charge up another flail toss, but then it occurred to him. I've got it. Continuing to spin Zangetsu, Ichigo's eyes narrowed in concentration. I've got to get the timing right on this. If you can't do it, King, then budge over and let me have control. Hollow Ichigo demanded. Getsuga, another kami forsaken word, and I'll carve the word, horse, into your fucking forehead using your own sword. Ichigo snapped savagely, fueling Zangetsu with even more Reiatsu as Hahio Zabumaru lunged once more at him. Tenshou. Still feeding more Reiatsu to Zangetsu, Ichigo released the getsuga right as Zangetsu's arc was in Hahio Zabumaru's direction. The getsuga tenshou managed to not only carve deeply into the Bankai's bone, but also knock it back quite a ways. But Ichigo wasn't done yet, he was still spinning Zangetsu for another one. Every time Zangetsu's arc aimed towards Renji and Hahio Zabumaru, another getsuga was released. Given Ichigo's spinning speed, there were nearly a dozen getsugas released, one after another, in the space of about 2, almost 3 seconds. When the smoke cleared, Hahio Zabumaru was broken in many places, barely holding together even with Renji's Reiatsu supporting it. However, Ichigo hardly in better shape. The sudden drop in his Reiatsu levels from sending so many getsugas in such a short amount of time made him feel extremely woozy, and combined with his pre-existing injuries, he was about ready to faint. Barely managing to steady himself, he saw Renji reseal his Zanpakudo completely and sheath it, looking dizzy from Reiatsu depletion himself. Good match, Renji admitted, breathing hard. Even though my limiter was on, to be able to damage Hahio Zabumaru like that, that's impressive. Ichigo stuck Zangetsu into the ground and dropped to one knee, supporting himself on his trusty Zanpakudo as he took several deep breaths to recover. Well, damn, didn't know you still had the limiter on. Fuck, Kenpachi can defeat Bankai with just his Shikai, and Renji's Bankai is relatively new, and I almost lost to a limited form. Hey, you didn't lose, and that says something, don't it? Renji commented on seeing Ichigo's scowl. Even with the limiter on, while I'm in Bankai I'm still about twice as powerful as when we fought in Soul Society. So since you fought me on even grounds with just your Shikai, I'd say you've improved pretty damn quick. I'm glad you didn't go Bankai on me. Especially if the rumors are true, and you beat Kuchiki Taicho. I fought him too with my new Bankai, and failed. Ichigo quickly did the math. Bankai is roughly 10 times as strong as Shikai. Limiter makes the wearer about 1/5 as strong. Assuming Renji's gotten any stronger at all, still at least twice as strong as that last fight. He finally nodded, losing the scowl. Yeah, you're right, he smirked. Maybe one of these days I'll be able to beat you in my Shikai. Yeah right, Strawberry, Renji scoffed. That would be quite the humiliation. Next time, fight me, Bankai to Bankai. I'll kick your ass. In order for you to beat me while I'm in Bankai, I'd have to still be in my human body. Ichigo taunted. Is all that hair getting in the way of your common sense, you pineapple-haired idiot? Renji scowled. You're just lucky Yamamoto Saotaicho told us to stick around as backup, or I'd leave you here high and dry. Ichigo laughed derisively. Yeah right, Renji, I can see right through you. You'd have come here anyway to fight and grow stronger. And you know Rukia would have stayed to help protect her friends, and you would never let her go. You're right, Renji admitted quietly. No, I could never let her go into certain life-threatening danger without me. Oi, Renji, you still there? Ichigo queried. His eyes, used to high-speed movement, had detected a strange look in Renji's for that brief second. Yeah, I'm all right, you orange-haired retard. Let's go get some food, I'm hungry. Ichigo smirked. Now you're talking. He quickly ran to get back in his body. Climbing up the ladder back into Urahara's shop, Renji's face turned sorrowful. If I could only know for sure, Rukia, is he who you want? Or are you just comrades? He shook his head. I gotta stop thinking about this. A war is no time to try for a relationship with her, not when we are both on front lines. He clenched his fist around one of the rungs of the ladder for a moment before he continued up. We need to focus on getting stronger. Love lives can wait until the crisis is over, if we both live that long. Ishida Ryu was a very even-tempered young man, calm and analytical in even the most trying situations. However, he found himself nervous as he approached his father's office. Urahara said Tosen was a powerful Quincy, but Tosen has always disapproved of my following the Quincy ways. He steeled himself. He will likely say no, but I must try. He knocked. Enter. Ryu entered, closing the door behind him. Tosen. Ishida Ryukin was a middle-aged man, with premature silver-white hair that framed his face. His dark tan skin provided an interesting contrast with his hair, while his height was nothing to sneeze at either, at approximately 5 foot 10 inches. Ryukin looked up from his paperwork. Ryu, what a surprise. His already calculating eyes narrowed. Why are you here? I come for training in the Quincy arts, Ryu answered swiftly, coming straight to the point. He looked his father straight in the eye. I know of your distaste of my choice to follow in my grandfather's footsteps. But he was your father, and if I am right, he must have trained you as well, even if you dislike your heritage. Ryukin stood up and looked out the window, his hands clasped behind his back. You know I reject my Quincy heritage, as it does not provide a way to mete out a living. I would have you focus on worldly pursuits, rather than follow the old ways. Your intellect is not unimpressive, you could succeed in any career you choose. Why do you insist on remaining a Quincy? Ryu scoffed, pushing his glasses up his nose a bit more, making them flash. What career could I follow if I were dead, Tosen? Would you have me be a Shinigami? There are rogue Shinigami who have stolen a very powerful item that allows them to create powerful Arrancar, and they have created an army with which to invade. I would advise you to leave the threat to the Shinigami, Ryukin answered calmly. Let the dead take care of the dead, and the living the living. Do you honestly believe that they will be effective at all? Ryu challenged. I, along with some allies, successfully infiltrated Soul Society less than a year ago and escaped with our lives. Not only that, but Aizen Sosuke and 2 other traitors escaped together in front of the entire Gote 13. Even if the Shinigami lose, the living and spirit worlds will remain separate, Ryukin stated, assured of his belief. He turned around and met Ryu's defiant gaze. What reason would this Aizen interfere with the living world? This, Ryu had an answer for immediately. The enemy wishes to sacrifice Karakura town to create an item known as the King's Key, which will allow him to assassinate the Spirit King. And if it fails, he'll try again and again in all of the major cities of the globe, or he'll find more ancient rituals. He has no problem sacrificing others to his plans, Tosen. He let his arm rise, letting his Quincy cross fall as he channeled Reiatsu through it, creating his Quincy bow, which he gripped firmly. I must embrace my Quincy heritage, Tosen, if I am to ensure my survival, and that of my friends. He shot a piercing look at his father. Is my logic flawed, Tosen? It is quite simple. For me to have the life you wish me to have, I need to live. The Shinigami may win or lose, but if I am a trained Quincy, my chances of survival are at their highest. Besides, this way I am protecting the living, so who are you to look down on my choice when you do the same thing in a different way? How is money more important than life? Ryukin's face flashed a look of pain for a brief instant, as though Ryu had shot an arrow instead of logic. Your logic is sound. Before I train you, however, I require an oath, sworn on the pride of the Quincy. What oath? Ryu asked, on guard. I want you to swear that unless it is to save a life, you will not use your Quincy powers, and that you will focus your energies on truly living in our world, instead of merely existing as you have been. Ryukin peered down his glasses at Ryu. You mean finding a job, maybe a girlfriend, finding hobbies and activities to do here in the living world instead of exclusively training, Ryu clarified. Yes. Ryu took a moment to consider. When he finished, he did not take a deep breath. He merely looked at his father. I swear, on the pride of the Quincy, that unless it is to save a life, or to maintain my skills, I will not use my Quincy powers. I further swear that after the current crisis is over, I will focus my energies on living my life as any other non-spiritually aware human would. Is that sufficient, Tosen? Ryukin frowned. He had noted the addition of skill preservation to Ryu's list of reasons to use his Quincy powers, but he could not truly fault his son on it. After the current crisis is over, meant little, as they both knew Ryu would count training himself to survive the coming onslaught as saving his own life, allowing him to train as much as he wanted until then. It is. Tonight, meet me at the doors to the hospital, and I will take you to train. Ryu let his spirit bow dissipate and bowed shortly. Thank you, Tosen. He turned and strode from the office, leaving his father staring off into space. Back at the school, Inoue Orihime ducked under one of Tatsuki's punches, grabbing her arm and twisting to throw her longtime best friend. Tatsuki rolled upon impact with the ground, relatively unscathed as she bounced back up and attacked. So, who were those 2 people out by the school the other day? Tatsuki asked nonchalantly, attempting a sweeping kick, which Orihime jumped over, spinning around for a mid-air kick. What two people? The busty girl queried as Tatsuki ducked underneath and pushed Orihime's leg up, trying to throw off her balance. It almost worked, but Orihime turned it into a variation of a back flip, landing on her feet. Oh, I'm sure you know the two. One of them was beating up Chad for a while, and then you cut his arm off with some projectile. Tatsuki replied, her tone changing into an accusing one towards the end. Orihime was so shocked that she tripped in her next attack. You saw that? She asked incredulously, before wincing in pain as Tatsuki took advantage of her shock and pinned her. Of course I did, Tatsuki answered angrily, and then Ichigo wielding some giant-ass cleaver. And then it turned into a black long sword. And he cut off the guy's other arm. What the hell is going on, Orihime? Orihime sighed. Alright, Tatsuki, let me up, and follow me. I might need some help with explaining some of it, so we're going to the normal meeting place. By the time both girls made it to Urahara's, Renji and Ichigo had finished lunch. Renji had gone to take a nap to replenish his Reiatsu, while Ichigo was back in the training basement in his human form, experimenting with new techniques, wanting a better feel for them. Ichigo began spinning Zangetsu above his head again, trying to get a feel for if his trusty blade had a limit to the amount of Reiatsu he could charge. There didn't seem to be, but after several rotations, he could feel Zangetsu converting only some of the Reiatsu into the getsuga tenshou. He narrowed his eyes, but then caught a thin blue sheen to his sword. An inkling suspicion wormed its way into his head, but he had to be sure. Just to be sure, the rest of the Reiatsu is being used to temporarily strengthen Zangetsu's durability so the getsuga doesn't shred my sword to pieces. Yeah, Hollow Ichigo said after a moment of inwardly consulting with Zangetsu. Just remember that the more you use Zangetsu, the stronger he gets. Ichigo frowned as he continued swinging Zangetsu over his head. Looks like charging up a getsuga is only really effective for a relatively short charge time. At least until we've been together longer. Using his free hand to grip a section of white cloth lower down from the blade, he used his stronger right arm to fling Zangetsu a direction that had several consecutive boulders. Getsuga tenshou. Zangetsu appeared as though it were covered in black flames as the getsuga engulfed it, and it carved through each of the boulders as though they were made of butter. Not only that, but the force of the throw split the boulders in half cleanly. Ichigo tugged back, and Zangetsu returned to his hand quickly. I can only imagine how powerful that attack will be if I use it in Bankai, using the chain instead of cloth. He shivered as he sat down to think, letting his Zanpakuto dissipate. Or if I did it with the mask on. See, King, now we shouldn't have any problems with not being able to pierce an Arrancar's Hierro, and even an Arrancar will die if it is pierced in the head. Assuming we can catch it, Ichigo reminded him. Remember, Grimmjow matched our max speed, and he is only the 6th Espada. We still need to beat Yammy's Resurrection form. If it's speed you need, I'd start working on mastering my sword. The extra speed and strength of a dual Bankai would be perfect for what you want. Ichigo nodded absently to himself. The only question is, how? His inner hollow cackled insanely. Ichigo, you can't honestly expect me to give it away that easily. You can figure it out yourself, or I can tell you for a price. What price? Give me control until our hollow form evolves into a Jillian. Ichigo's scowl deepened. Fuck no, I'll figure this out myself. As he got up, he sensed two familiar signatures. One's Inoue. Ichigo turned, and saw Tatsuki with her, at the base of the ladder. With a flash of shunpo, he was a couple of meters away from them. Ignoring the stress in his legs, he questioned the newcomers. Inoue, Tatsuki, what are you two doing here? Tatsuki fell over. What the hell, you were just over there a second ago. She bellowed, pointing at Ichigo's former location a fair distance away. I'm fast, Ichigo merely told her. Inoue, what's going on? Why did you bring Tatsuki here? She can see spirits now, Inoue said simply. And she saw us fighting Yammy during their first invasion. Tatsuki wanted an explanation, and I feel she deserves one. She's our friend. Ichigo sighed and nodded. What do you want to know? Over the course of the next hour, Tatsuki was brought up to speed. Inoue had begun with overexcited enthusiasm about her best friend joining them, jumping all over the place with her explanation. Thankfully for Tatsuki's understanding, Ichigo interrupted and gave the barebones version, starting from his gaining Shinigami powers to the current predicament with the Arrancar. He completely skipped everything that wasn't necessary, including his own inner hollow. After several moments' hesitation, he included the requirement to create the King's Key, to which Tatsuki was understandably horrified. However, she didn't seem to understand just how powerful their enemies were, and wanted to join in. Even Inoue could see how that could go terribly wrong, especially without any evident powers of Tatsuki's own. You don't get it, Tatsuki, these aren't human beings. Ichigo tried to explain, his frustration getting the better of him. Martial arts aren't going to cut it. Then make me understand, Ichigo. Tatsuki challenged. Show me how powerful these monsters are. Fine. With a swift movement, Ichigo slammed his Shinigami badge against his chest, letting his human body fall to the ground. You asked for this, Tatsuki. The only thing I'm seeing is you in a strange robe with a big-ass sword. Tatsuki responded, chilled despite herself at Ichigo's tone. Determined to make his friend see reason, Ichigo jumped back and brought his sword up to horizontal level with his right hand, his left gripping his right forearm. Ban. Tatsuki could suddenly sense a feeling of deep foreboding. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea. Kai. The sudden rush of Reiatsu would have blown Tatsuki clear across the training room if Inoue hadn't brought her shield into place, protecting her friend. When the Reiatsu cleared, Ichigo was in Bankai mode, Tensa Zangetsu held tightly in his hand. So you had a costume change, Tatsuki said, trying for a confident tone but failing as her voice cracked. So what? And then Ichigo was gone, wind billowing in to take the place of where he had been. Tatsuki looked around frantically, trying to find him, but then Ichigo reappeared, right where he was, his back turned towards Tatsuki, but his head turned to the right, eyes downcast. I'm sorry, he murmured. Sorry for what? Tatsuki questioned before feeling something warm and wet sliding down her forehead. She brought her finger up and dabbed at it, bringing it to her eyes. It was blood, leaking through a very thin cut on her forehead. Tatsuki wasn't stupid, she knew the significance. If Ichigo wanted to, he could kill her at any given moment, and she wouldn't even see it coming until she was already dead. Tatsuki looked at Ichigo in newfound horror. Was my training, my achievements, all for nothing? Is this, the power of the Arrancar? No, Inoue said sadly. Tatsuki was confused. That's good, right? Why does Inoue sound depressed? They are even more powerful. Ichigo finished grimly. Faster, stronger than me. You've got to be kidding. Tatsuki blurted. How can anything be faster and stronger than that? Ichigo turned away so Tatsuki could only see his hair and back. I only wish I was kidding. No, do you see why I want you to stay back? Is there anyone else on your team nearly as fast as you are? Tatsuki demanded, her embarrassment turning to anger as she fought to join the team. Ishida or you, Ichigo replied easily. But the others have powers that protect them. Inoue. He leapt back, raised his sword. Getsuga Tenshou. Orihime. Tatsuki exclaimed, trying to move her best friend out of the way of the wide, black crescent-shaped attack, but was startled to see a determined look on Inoue's face as she steadied her stance and brought her hands to her hairpins. Santen Keshun. The getsuga collided with the shield, fighting it, trying to break it, but Inoue held firm, and the getsuga exploded. When the smoke cleared, Inoue's shield was still in place. What? Tatsuki gasped, seeing the golden shield. That was my Santen Keshun, Inoue explained quietly. I have two other powers, healing and attack. My primary purpose is defense and healing, though, as I'm bound by my physical limits. Until I figure out a way to fix that, I'm going to be on the sidelines as well. Tatsuki collapsed to the ground, sitting with her knees in front of her and her feet to her sides. I think I see your point, Ichigo, she said weakly. I may be the second strongest girl in Japan, but my martial arts wouldn't do anything to either of you, let alone your enemies. She looked down sadly. I'd just get in your way. Ichigo merely nodded. Yeah, it was harsh, but that was the truth of the matter. He decided to try to cheer her up a bit. Don't feel too down. I know you'd have my back if I got into a fight with any human being, but these guys aren't human. Yeah, Tatsuki looked up at Inoue. Don't worry, I'll keep your secrets. Still best friends. Inoue wiped away a tear as she smiled at her friend. Of course we are, Tatsuki. She extended a hand and helped Tatsuki up, the two of them hugging as they renewed their bonds of friendship. Oh, Inoue said suddenly, you need to meet the Shinigami who are here to help out. I'm sure you and Rangaku-san will get along great. With the spontaneity of a girl thoroughly enjoying ADHD, she quickly dragged a half-heartedly protesting Tatsuki up the ladder before Ichigo had time to say a word. Ichigo blinked. Okay then. Releasing his Bankai, he sat down, crossing his legs, and set Zangetsu down in front of him, on the sword's side. How do I summon the other you? The orange-haired Shinigami murmured, light flashing on the sharp edge of his precious Zanpakuto. I wonder if you can figure it out before our battle, Ichigo. Hollow Ichigo taunted. Remember, only 4 days until our fight to see who is king. Yeah, Ichigo knew that quite well. Being able to use his Hollow Self's sword could make or break his fight, as he had little doubt Hollow Ichigo could already dual wield. Chapter 8. Hollow Reassurances. 3 days passed, but it had not been a pleasant few days. More and more Hollows were appearing every day, and while the majority of them had been weaklings, there had been a 2 jillion attacks. Ishida theorized, and the various Shinigami agreed, that it was likely due to the high numbers of spiritually strong people in the area. Ichigo himself wasn't sure, wondering how far Aizen's power had extended, but in the end, it didn't matter. No matter what the cause is, we can't do anything about it. Ichigo was worried about his upcoming fight with his inner Hollow. It would take place that night, and between his Kido training with Tessai, the various Hollow attacks, and sparring with Renji, he had little time to work on summoning Hollow Ichigo's Zangetsu. It's not like I haven't made progress with Kido, though, Ichigo thought to himself, trying to keep high spirits. Over the last 3 days, he'd learned another 2 Kido. One was Hado 63, Soren Sukatsui, which was essentially firing a more powerful Hado 33, Sukatsui twice. The other was Ichigo's first Bakudo, one he knew quite well, Bakudo 1, Sai. This was the same Bakudo that Rukia had punished him with at their first meeting, that same night when Rukia had given Ichigo her Shinigami powers. Ichigo still needed the full incantation for Hado 63, Soren Sukatsui, but he had gotten decently good at Bakudo 1, Sai. It certainly helped his mood that he was able to practice on Renji, and occasionally Rukia. Ichigo still wasted quite a bit of Reiatsu using the Bakudo, which made it a little weaker, but he knew that before he had begun training in Kido, he wouldn't have been able to do it at all. I still need to figure out how to use my Hollow Self's sword. The pressure weighed on him, but Ichigo knew he had a history of performing well under pressure. Finally, the morning of the final day, he sighed. Tessai-sensei, I need your advice on a matter unrelated to Kido. How may I assist, Ichigo? Tessai queried. It's like this, the orange-haired Vizard explained the whole situation, how he would be once again fighting his inner Hollow, but that he was certain he needed to learn how to use the second Zangetsu. Have you attempted it while wearing your mask? Tessai suggested. Ichigo nodded. First thing I tried. Figured that as it was my Hollow's sword, wearing my Hollow's mask would help. And I assume you've attempted it the same way you summon your own sword, Tessai mused. Yeah, even tried calling out Zangetsu the way I originally had to when I first gained the ability, Ichigo admitted. Are you sure that the second sword's name is Zangetsu? Ichigo sighed. I can't think of anything else it could be. Even my inner Hollow refers to it as Zangetsu. Perhaps there's a command phrase you need to use to make it split in two. Tessai thought aloud. Ichigo felt his hopes rise. That might just be it. The only question is, what is the command? Tessai reminded, sending Ichigo's hopes crashing down again. I was able to take his Zanpakuto just by focusing my will and Reiatsu down it, reasserting my mastery, Ichigo muttered. It's got to be something like that. An idea struck him. I'm not sure, but I think I've got it. Try it, Tessai suggested, privately eager to see his pupil succeed. Shifting Zangetsu to his right hand only, Ichigo raised his left hand. Hollow, Ichigo yelled into his mind. As your king, I demand your sword. Hollow Ichigo cackled his approval. That's more like it, king. No more of that pitiful, won't you tell me? Shit, the sword is rightfully yours, won by blood and sweat, by right of conquest. Now take my sword, and slaughter your enemies. The hollow's white reiatsu swirled around Ichigo's left wrist before moving forward, shaping itself into the form of Zangetsu's Shikai. Ichigo looked at it, and smiled at the white Zangetsu in his left hand. There we are. Let's see how strong your getsuga is now, Tessai suggested. I like the way you think, Tessai-sensei. Ichigo crossed his arms over his body, so the white Zangetsu was on the right, and his black Zangetsu was on the left. Both blades had their edges aiming outwards. Getsuga Tenshou, Ichigo commanded, pumping reiatsu into both swords as he swung the swords until they were both directly in front of him. The effect was very interesting to look at, to say the least. On the left and right sides were Ichigo's standard Getsuga Tenshou attacks, but in the middle where they met, the Getsuga's power had increased so much it was almost purple in color. The power mix was gradual, so the outsides were blue, but the further towards the middle it was, the darker and larger the blast was. The Getsuga plowed through 3 boulders before finally using up its energy and exploding on the 4th, blowing away a large chunk of it. Ichigo smirked. That was good. Ichigo, your fighting style so far has been based around using one sword, Tessai warned. You need to learn or develop a style that involves both swords, or this new development will prove more of a hindrance than a help. Ichigo frowned. Yeah, you're right. He hefted the white Zangetsu with his left arm, scowling as he realized that it wasn't as strong as his right. Any ideas? I've got one. Urahara's voice rang out as he shunpoed next to them. It was a testament to Ichigo's battle experience that he didn't jump, though he did give Urahara a dirty look. How long were you listening, Urahara? Only since I felt your hollow's reiatsu at work, the shopkeeper said cheerfully. Anyway, there's a Shinigami Taicho, Hiraku Shunsui, whose Zanpakudo takes the form of 2 swords. Great, Ichigo said with a smirk. It'll be good training to spar with a Taicho. But, Urahara paused. But, the Vizard in training repeated. He's not really available. He can't come here, as he's needed to protect Soul Society, and you can't go meet him, as you're the primary defender of Karakura town, Urahara finished. Well, fuck, Ichigo scowled. Guess I'll just have use what I know and improvise against my hollow. Before then, care for a spar? Urahara offered with a secret smile, his hat and hair casting a shadow on his face where only his left eye could be seen. Ichigo nodded, remembering how Urahara had taught him how to use Zangetsu when he'd first achieved Shikai. He recalled how Urahara had never once brought out his Shikai, and knew that the wily ex-Shinigami would have several tricks up his sleeve. He jumped back and tried to find a stance he was comfortable with, using both swords. He settled for keeping his arms at his sides, so his Zanpakudo were angled forward and up, while sticking out to the sides somewhat. Ichigo frowned, the stance unfamiliar to him. He was accustomed to using one sword. He'd fought that way for quite some time now, and he'd gotten quite good at it. He shook his head. Even if I have to start from the beginning over again, so long as I get stronger. Urahara gave that same small smile as he held up his Zanpakudo, still sealed in a cane. I think I should release my own precious Benihime, or I'll lose to your mastery of the Getsuga Tenshou. So, awaken, Benihime. Now that Ichigo had a chance to look at it, Urahara's Zanpakudo was quite an exquisite one. While the handle was a little twisted, resembling the cane it had been, the sword was straight and thin. Nevertheless, a simple U-shaped decoration at the bottom of the blade added style, in addition to what looked like a knotted red string taking the place of a hilt. He had to admit, it suited Urahara well. Yes, Benihime is a lovely Zanpakudo, Urahara agreed out loud, seeing Ichigo's appreciative gaze. Quite powerful as well, but not nice at all in Bankai. So I'd rather we stick to Shikai and Kido. Ichigo nodded, then realized. Wait, can I even use Kido with both my hands full? Fuck. Then let's begin. Urahara dashed at Ichigo at speeds far faster than the orange-haired Shinigami had been capable of when he'd first regained his powers. However, Ichigo had trained in Shunpo directly under Yoruichi, the goddess of flash. It was nothing for him to track Urahara, and he met the slash with his black Zangetsu, blocking. The blow shook his right arm, but his human training paid off as Ichigo was able to hold Benihime from continuing further. Ichigo counter-attacked with the white Zangetsu, the sword flashing as he could almost feel his hollow's thirst for blood within it. However, Before he could make contact, Urahara disappeared. The sudden lack of resistance to his sword almost made him stumble, but Ichigo caught himself quickly and reached out with his spiritual sense. Where is he? Sing, Benihime. Ichigo spun to meet Urahara's energy blast, his swords charging as they cut through the air. Getsuga Tenshou. As he'd had his swords next to each other as he spun to reduce air resistance, it created a stronger Getsuga, all of it a blue-purple. His Getsugas met Urahara's crimson energy blast, and both exploded. Ma, that's surprising, Urahara said cheerfully through the smoke of Reiatsu. I put a lot of power into that one, but you still managed to match it. Despite listening carefully, Ichigo couldn't tell where Urahara was. Well, if I can't pinpoint, putting his swords in the same position as before the shopkeeper had appeared, he slashed and released a silent Getsuga Tenshou. While it was slightly weaker than before, Ichigo felt the possible element of surprise was worth it. His spiritual senses screamed a warning and Ichigo responded instinctually, twisting his upper body to block a potentially crippling slash from Benihime with his black Zangetsu. Nice block, Urahara complimented. Thanks, Ichigo said with a smirk before disappearing with Shunpo. Urahara hadn't expected that, but recovered gracefully. Copycat, Urahara called out as he swept his trained eyes across the area, looking for his opponent. Hado 33, Sukatsui. The clog-shod man Shunpo ed to his left, allowing the fast Hado to completely pass him by, piercing a hole in a nearby rock. Good attempt, Ichigo, Urahara said, seeing Ichigo pick up Zangetsu. Ichigo had stuck his right sword into the ground to free his hand for the Kido. But I've trained with Yoruichi for ages. You'll have to try harder than that to beat me, I'm afraid. Fine then. Ichigo dashed at Urahara with all the speed he could, holding his twin Zanpakudo together as he slashed at Urahara, who blocked with Benihime. You're not fast enough or skilled enough yet to use both of them easily, Urahara said calmly. Your Zanpakudo is strong, but it is heavy, and detracts from your speed. Wielding two of them increases your attack power, yes, but at the cost of your agility. He spun and slashed at Ichigo, who blocked with his black Zangetsu and swung the white one at Urahara's side, hoping to catch him. Urahara merely disappeared, reappearing on Ichigo's other side, managing a moderate slice before Ichigo could spin and try to cut him. Urahara merely disappeared and reappeared several meters back. What use is a second weapon if you cannot catch me with it? Ichigo frowned. He'd noticed the same thing. Right now, the only thing the second Zangetsu is good for is in Bankai mode, as Tensa Zanjutsu is much lighter than Zangetsu's Shikai form. He let the white Zangetsu dissipate into spirit particles, and took his familiar stance, with both hands on his trusty weapon. Then let's try this again, he yelled, flaring his Reiatsu. Yes, let's. Urahara unleashed his own significant Reiatsu as they stared at each other for a moment before rushing at each other. They struck, Zanpakudo clashing as they tried to overpower each other. Getsuga Tenshou. Sing, Benihime. Zangetsu was covered in the ethereal blue flame of a Getsuga, trying to overpower a similarly enhanced Benihime. The scene reminded Ichigo of his fight with Kuchiki Byakuya at the Tsukyuku. He smirked and lowered his head, creeping Urahara out a little. He let go of Zangetsu with his left hand, his right struggling to maintain the fight against Urahara's power. Ichigo quickly raised his hand and pointed his index and middle fingers. Hado 4, the orange-haired Shinigami began with a smirk, his fingers glowing a whitish yellow, Byakurai. At this point-blank distance, Urahara could not dodge completely, but he made a valiant effort anyway. He leapt back and to the side, but the Byakurai still pierced through part of his shoulder. That's not good, Urahara thought to himself. He might actually beat me. He smiled mischievously, and that just won't do. Keeping the Getsuga in his blade with some concentration, Ichigo dashed after Urahara, who leapt back and gathered his Reiatsu, pointing the palm of his left hand at his attacker. Bakudo 61. Raikujokuro, Urahara murmured, too low for Ichigo to hear. Ichigo never saw it coming. One moment he was almost upon Urahara, the next he felt 6 wide, thin things slamming into his midsection from all around him. Suddenly, Ichigo was forcibly stopped cold. He quickly experimented with moving any part of his body, and found he was completely bound somehow. His eyes could make out long, wide yellow beams sticking out in his peripheral vision and below him. A Bakudo, Ichigo realized, summoning up his strength and trying to break out. He grunted as he made no progress whatsoever. Urahara held Benihime to his side casually as he approached Ichigo. It seems Bakudo is still your weakness, Ichigo, he commented with a smile. That was a level 61 Bakudo, which requires more than just brute strength to break out of. So I see, Ichigo replied dryly. Alright, you win. So, how do I get out of this? You need to be familiar and skilled with Bakudo at least up to the level that you are entrapped in, the shopkeeper instructed. After that, you would have to unravel the Bakudo with your Reiatsu until it's weak enough for you to break free with sheer strength. As for how, that's for you to figure out, Urahara said cheerfully. Damn you, Urahara. Urahara ignored him. An alternate method is to have someone else destroy or disrupt the bonds holding you there. In this case, someone would need to destroy the beams holding you there. The final method is simply to wait for it to wear off. Well, as I'd like to be able to move again soon, and I have only just gotten started with Bakudo, would you mind releasing me? Ichigo requested with a sour look on his face. Urahara smiled wider. Not normally, no, but you should see this as training, Ichigo. Try to weaken the Bakudo until you can break free. If you can't before your fight with your hollow, Urahara shrugged. Well, it's a free Bakudo to help restrain your berserker body. Ichigo frowned, feeling out with his Reiatsu. He closed his eyes, visualizing his body, trying to feel how the foreign Reiatsu was freezing him. He decided to start at his extremities. To his mild surprise, there was no enemy Reiatsu in the muscles of his hands. Methodically, Ichigo moved up his arms to his shoulders, nothing. Okay Ichigo, think. I'm frozen, can't move an inch. Except for my mouth. If it's not stopping my muscles directly, it must be stopping the muscles from getting the signals. He frowned. Perhaps the nerve endings then. Within his mind's eye, Ichigo tried to zoom in and visualize his nervous system. This time, he hit jackpot. In the majority of his nerve endings was a small concentration of Reiatsu he recognized as Urahara's. Well, let's try the obvious. He focused some of his Reiatsu and annihilated a few offending nerve blockers, only to frown as the blocking Reiatsu seemingly regenerated. Ichigo paused. It must be coming from those bars of light. Maybe I need to cancel out the root of my being bound in order to regain movement. With that new thought in mind, Ichigo moved his area of focus to his midsection, where he could sense where the Bakudo was entering his body and nervous system. With a frown of concentration, the bound Shinigami used his Reiatsu to sort of pinch off the enemy Reiatsu, creating a dam of Reiatsu that the Bakudo could not penetrate. After he managed to get one of the 6 bars he could tell were attached to him, Ichigo was surprised to see the bar in front of him suddenly just dissipate, no longer being attached to anything. His lips curled up into a smirk. It only took a few more minutes, and then Ichigo was completely free. He stood tall, proud of his accomplishment. Oi, King, ready to fight? I know I am. Just a sec, I'll be right there. Oi, Urahara, remember, same rules as last time. If he wins, open a way to Hueco Mundo for him. I win, everything stays the same. He sent a cocky smile to Urahara and Tessai. Back soon. With that, Ichigo pulled himself into his inner world. He and his inner hollow traded bloodthirsty grins. Ready to get this started? Ichigo proposed. Was waiting on you, King. Or should I say, former King. Hollow Ichigo taunted. You think you can rule, then come take my crown. Ichigo challenged, readying Zangetsu. His hollow side did the same, a manic grin growing on his face. Don't worry, Ichigo, when I win I'll honor my end of the deal. I won't devour you. After all, who better to fight me than my supposed good half? I'll only grow stronger with you here. Ichigo snorted. Then prove it, Hollow. Both he and Hollow Ichigo disappeared in a flash of shunpo, their blades once more clashing. Ichigo's strength had grown so much that both he and his hollow half were only using their right hands to swing Zangetsu, leaving their left hands open. Hado 4. Byakurai. They announced in tandem, a mirror image as they dodged, breaking their deadlock. Hado 33. Sukatsui. The 2 enormous blue fireballs met and exploded against each other, creating a large smokescreen. Ichigo took the opportunity to leap back and quickly gripped a strip of Zangetsu's cloth before swinging his Zanpakudo above his head, charging it as quickly as he could, creating a wind that began clearing the smoke in the process. Getsuga Tenshou. The hollow bellowed, his light blue Getsuga streaking out of the rapidly clearing smoke at Ichigo. Now that Ichigo could see his opponent, he could think tactically. It's too far to throw and hope for any chance of it hitting him, not with our Shunpo speeds. Best go for a wide area effect. Ichigo smirked, and stopped spinning Zangetsu, catching the Zanpakudo in his hand as he swung it against hollow Ichigo's Getsuga, deflecting it and unleashing his own. Getsuga Tenshou. Ichigo's Getsuga, far stronger than his normal ones, raced at his hollow self, but the hollow hadn't been standing still, doing nothing. The spiritual manifestation of Ichigo's hollow powers used Shunpo and appeared above and to Ichigo's right. Wait at the far heavens. Hollow Ichigo cried out, finishing the incantation. 2 streams of blue energy streamed into his left hand, creating a shuddering blue orb. Hado 63. Soren Sukatsui. The orb suddenly turned into a circular stream of fiery blue energy whose diameter fluctuated between 1 and 2 meters wide, shooting forward at a speed comparable to Ichigo's Bankai. Both shots had been fired as one, creating a very powerful blast. Shit, Ichigo yelped, trying to dodge. He mostly managed, but had to use Zangetsu to block when it would have clipped his arm. I am so glad Zangetsu is strong enough for this. Not bad, Ichigo, the hollow complimented. Gotta say, that's a nice attack. Kinda like a Shinigami version of a Sero in a way. Not bad yourself, hollow me, Ichigo returned. And thanks for the reminder that the Getsuga is much better close up. He dashed up, attempting to strike his hollow side with a Getsuga-enhanced Zangetsu. The hollow readied his own sword and Getsuga, clashing with Ichigo into another deadlock. He grinned as Ichigo brought his lead hand onto Zangetsu as well, adding extra power. Ichigo was slowly but surely overwhelming him. Not for long. Bakudo won. Sigh. Ichigo was hit by the point-blank Bakudo, but broke it before it could bring his hands behind his back. Even so, it lessened Ichigo's intensity for a split second, which is all his hollow self needed to leap back out of Ichigo's reach and get into position. Let's take this to the next level, Ichigo. Ban. Shit. Ichigo quickly raised Zangetsu to horizontal level. Ban. Kai. Outside Ichigo's mindscape, Urahara and Tessai waited. They had bound Ichigo's hollowifying berserker form with Bakudo 99, Banken, and now merely waited in the event that it would not be enough to hold him. Because Banken wraps a foe head to toe in fabric, they had no idea if he was repeating his last transformation, or if there was something new in there. Either way, they weren't curious enough to find out. Do you think Ichigo will win this round as well? Tessai questioned. Hard to say, Urahara muttered. I suppose it depends on how skilled Ichigo is when they are both at full power. Since he has the power of dual wielding with both swords in Bankai, he paused, looking at Ichigo's bound body. Ichigo's Bankai form is extremely powerful, and I cannot deny his strength when wielding a sword. But using 2 swords requires a different style, one he hasn't learned yet. So the question becomes, who is better at it? Ichigo, or his hollow? A pulse of Reiatsu alerted them to Ichigo, and they could see Banken slowly crumbling under its immense pressure. Ichigo must have gone Bankai, Tessai said aloud, taking on a battle stance. Ichigo has grown even stronger than the last time we did this, Urahara replied with a smile, silently releasing Benihime into Shikai. How much time do we have before he breaks free? Tessai eyed his Bakudo with a critical eye. I give it 3 minutes, he finally said. I hope Ichigo finishes this soon. Back within Ichigo's inner world, the orange-haired protector clashed against his inner hollow, black against white, twin swords fighting for supremacy. Getsuga Tenshou. Ichigo barked out, trying to overpower his hollow half as his Tensa Zangetsu was engulfed in the powerful black Getsuga. Ruthless, aren't we? The hollow commented as he deflected Ichigo's attack to his right, twisting to the left to completely avoid the blow. Ichigo smirked, turning the deflection into an all-out spin, letting Tensa Zangetsu slip forward from his hands until he was holding on the chain. As he spun, he charged the Getsuga further. Only to horses that need to learn their place. Getsuga Tenshou. Hollow Ichigo barely managed to put up his sword in time to try to block the empowered Getsuga, and the white representation of Ichigo's hollow powers was pushed back as the white Tensa Zangetsu struggled to dissipate Ichigo's energy attack. The hollow took only a second to flip his Tensa Zangetsu upwards, deflecting the attack skywards. Not bad, Ichigo. Ichigo readjusted his grip on Tensa Zangetsu. You're not half bad yourself, Hollow. You've come far in using Zangetsu the way he was meant to be used, Hollow Ichigo complimented with a grin. I'm glad. It means that when I take over, I'll be that much stronger. Thanks, but you should know by now, I am going to win. Ichigo said seriously, with a small smirk forming on his face. You wish. Hollow Ichigo's grin grew further as he dashed and slashed at Ichigo, who blocked it readily. Ready to take it a step further. I can't wait to fight someone at speeds even faster than this. Ichigo smirked as he used Shunpo to dash back and begin swinging Tensa Zangetsu above his head, charging it with another powerful Getsuga. As I thought, because I gained the ability to use your sword, you gained the ability to use mine. The hollow part of Ichigo's soul let loose a grin reminiscent of Kenpachi as he raised his hand. Bakudo won. Sigh. Ichigo wasn't even affected as he shrugged off the Bakudo like it didn't exist. Hollow Ichigo's grin only widened as he used Shunpo to try to slice Ichigo before his opponent could block. Of course I can use your sword, Ichigo. I am the hollow part of your power, and I contain the Shinigami part within me. The hollow laughed. Anything you can do, I can do. Ichigo let out a genuine grin as he stopped spinning his sword, slapping it into his hand with a raging Getsuga covering it, slashing at his deadly foe. Anything but get a tan, you mean? Hey. Hollow Ichigo sounded almost affronted as he leapt up in the air to avoid the silent Getsuga Ichigo had unleashed, but his own mischievous grin gave him away. I'll have you know that white is much better than boring old black. At least I don't look like I just came from a funeral. No, Ichigo agreed, slamming Tensa Zangetsu against its duplicate. Just an asylum for the crazies. I wonder where your straitjacket went. Both opponents pushed their weapons harder, using both hands to try to define who would be king this time. This is your mind, remember. If I'm crazy, what does that make you? Point to you, Ichigo conceded as he broke the deadlock, jumping backwards to put some distance between them. Come, let us take this fight even higher. He and his hollow half raised their left hands, calling forth another Tensa Zangetsu apiece. The second the new swords were manifested, both of them disappeared, moving at speeds far faster than previously, on par with Ichigo's Bankai while wearing his mask when he fought Grimmjow. In the real world, awaken, Benihime. Urahara said quickly, unleashing his Shikai as the high-level Bakudo restraining the berserker Ichigo was suddenly obliterated by a pulse of even stronger Reiatsu. The Reiatsu pulse that Ichigo had emitted was unreal in sheer power. In this state, he might even beat my own Bankai. Urahara had to admit, he was both frightened and awed by Ichigo's rate of growth. Bakudo 81. Danku. Tessai bellowed, creating an enormous square Kido barrier that would block most Reiatsu, including Kido attacks up to level 89. The barrier was mostly transparent, allowing him to see his Bakudo 99, Banken shatter like dropped china. Urahara dono. I know, Urahara replied softly. He's summoned the second sword, and used it in Bankai. Be prepared for extremely high-speed combat. Just then, they saw the berserker Ichigo's hollow form. It was, once again, the form of the lied white lizard man hybrid, but this time there was a black sword in its right hand, and a white in its left. Urahara raised his Zanpakudo, and not a moment too soon, as less than breath later Ichigo's berserker body had struck it with black Tensa Zangetsu. Sing, Benihime. Urahara yelped quickly, slashing at the hollow and unleashing the blood-red tiara-shaped attack. The hollow was thrown back, but managed to use the white Tensa Zangetsu to absorb the majority of the impact. It slashed at Urahara, and a silent black Getsuga rocketed at Urahara. Sing, Benihime. Now, Urahara's trusty crimson shield blocked the majority of the attack, though a portion still managed to slice part of his hat, sending it flying. How nostalgic, Urahara thought to himself, remembering how the newly reborn Shinigami Ichigo had done the exact same thing. Time to get serious, I think. Move over, Urahara, a new voice yelled out. Urahara skillfully blocked another one of the hollow's moves, and quickly glanced at the voice. He smiled, recognizing the bone-straight shoulder-length blonde hair of the leader, and all of his companions. Good to see you. Hirako Shinji grinned, gripping his Zanpakudo. I said, move over. It's our turn to fight him. The Vizard had arrived. Hachigen, barrier. All right. With a clap of his hands, 5 barriers appeared around the berserk hollow form of Ichigo, creating a cube to which he was bound. He's fast, Urahara warned. I don't know how strong you are now, but don't underestimate him. I'll fight him first, Kensai volunteered. He eyed the berserker Ichigo with distaste. He much preferred orderly fights, and this hollow appeared to be extremely bloodthirsty. All right, we'll swap out every 3 minutes, Shinji ordered. Except Hachigen, you're to maintain the barrier. Understood. Tessai quietly approached his old lieutenant. Hachigen, I am glad you have continued your training. You appear to have truly surpassed me. Thank you, sensei. Hachigen sat down to meditate, allowing Kensai inside the barrier with a frown of concentration. Blow it away, Tachikas, Kensai stated strongly. Even I know better than to take on a Taicho-level Bankai without releasing. His Zanpakudo glowed, then shrunk down to a long survival knife, approximately 7 inches long. His eyes widened as Ichigo was suddenly in front of him, and Kensai barely managed to block a strike from the beast's white Tensei-Zangetsu. He leapt back, charging a large amount spiritual energy with wind, with the help of Tachikas. It quickly formed a glowing white orb, which he shoved into Ichigo when the monstrous form pursued. An enormous blue blast was unleashed, obliterating 2 more boulders behind where Ichigo had been. I hope that got him, otherwise I'm dead already. Thankfully for Kensai, it struck true and successfully knocked the hollow form several meters. Without further ado, Kensai quickly summoned his hollow mask and put it on. It resembled a flat rectangular hockey mask covering his face, with 3 slotted holes lined down each side. At the left and right sides, it extended around, covering the sides and back of his head in the shape of a hexagon. Wow, mask and release already? Shinji asked, incredulously. What the hell, Kensai? Hiyori yelled angrily. He can't be that strong to warrant so much power. You're wrong, Hiyori. I barely got him, and if he'd used both blades, I would be dead right now, Kensai replied, loudly enough to be heard by everyone. Remember, he's in Bankai, with a hollow mask, and we already know Ichigo's approximate Reiatsu level without either of those. Even so, we've fought him before with his hollow mask in Bankai, Rose remarked. He wasn't nearly this fast then. Kensai narrowly dodged a slice, kicking Ichigo further away. Shinji frowned. He didn't have the second sword then either, he pointed out. Perhaps it compounds the effect of his Bankai, Lisa postulated. Kensai he quickly dodged to the side and punched the berserker in the head with his left hand, his hollow enhanced strength sending Ichigo flying. It's lucky that this version can't think and plan too well. The hollow version of Ichigo screamed in an incoherent rage, stabbing the white version of Tensei-Zangetsu into the ground before pointing 3 sharp claws at Kensai, a red orb of spinning hollow energy quickly forming. Sero, Kensai realized, but he was too far away to stop Ichigo from using it without cutting off his limbs. He powered up a Sero of his own to counter it. Urahara watched in awe. So strong. Who would be stronger, myself, or one of the Vizard? Have I been slacking on my own training? Meanwhile, Ichigo and his hollow self fought in the air, preferring the added maneuverability. I have to finish this quick. Ichigo could feel his heart pumping harder and faster than what ought to be good for him. His muscles were burning, his bones shuddered a little more at every impact. I don't know how much longer I can last. Ichigo decided to try something new. Getsuga Tenshou. Ichigo fired at his hollow, slashing both blades across his body to create an extremely powerful getsuga. Hollow Ichigo prepared a getsuga in each blade to cancel it, but wasn't expecting Ichigo to appear behind him, another getsuga at the ready as he slashed. Attacking from 2 sides. Good idea, Ichigo, but you forgot the other avenues of exit. Hollow Ichigo slashed upwards at Ichigo while letting himself fall through the air. Naturally, Ichigo blocked, but that provided the extra momentum needed to the hollow to escape Ichigo's first blast and put Ichigo directly in its path. Ichigo was forced to expend his second getsuga to cancel the first with a curse. Naturally, the hollow took advantage of Ichigo's momentary distraction, and had Shunpo Ed directly in front of Ichigo, whose arms and swords were at either side of his body, having just completed canceling the getsuga with one of his own. Hollow Ichigo smiled cruelly and slashed down with both swords. Ichigo, to his credit, reacted swiftly, and managed to keep the blow from cutting off his arms by raising his twin Zanpakuto to block, but the muscles and tendons between his shoulders and neck had been cut moderately, and Ichigo felt the bones in his arms crack, causing even greater pain as he struggled to hold his hollow self back. You took advantage of me being preoccupied with canceling my own attack, and landed a blow that almost killed me, Ichigo muttered, feeling out with his Reiatsu to see how bad it was. My strength has been cut significantly, and I'm at a huge disadvantage now. My only hope is to surprise him and spear him through. That, Ichigo, is why you only put yourself in that sort of position if you're sure you can keep your enemy between yourself and the attack, Hollow Ichigo lectured. Not that you'll get a chance to use that. I can tell already, your arms have lost some of their strength. I cut too deeply on you. Admit it, Ichigo, you've lost. He laughed, only to abruptly stop and narrowly avoid a crippling slash from the side. Don't underestimate me, Ichigo hissed, eyes blazing in determination, ignoring the searing pain in his whole body. I must admit, Ichigo, you continually impress me. Even critically injured, your strength being sapped, you still almost manage to win. I would say I am proud to call you king. Hollow Ichigo disappeared from sight, and Ichigo whirled on instinct, using both swords to block one of his hollows, but I have stolen your crown. The hollow slashed with his left Tensei-Zangetsu, and bloodthirsty grin on his face. Ichigo felt quite odd. He was bleeding, he had lost, he knew that. Why doesn't this bother me more? And why doesn't this hurt? He looked down, seeing a white Tensei-Zangetsu embedded in his torso. Then he saw his feet slowly disintegrating. I'm sure this should hurt, but I feel fine. Remember our deal, Hollow. My name is not Hollow. Ichigo felt a spark of curiosity as his limbs began dissipating as well. I thought you didn't know your name. The Hollow smiled, looking a bit more like Ichigo now. That was then. My name is Cazador de la Luna, Moon's Hunter. Ichigo smirked, feeling his neck and head begin vanishing. Then, King Cazador, you have 2 weeks to get as strong as you can in Hueco Mundo. Show them our power, because you won't get another chance. With that, he was gone. I look forward to your next attempt, Kurosaki Ichigo. Cazador gave another bloodthirsty grin, turning as Ichigo's inner world sky changed to a starless night sky, one with a bright full moon shining down upon the sideways skyscrapers. However, the moon, instead of white, was blood red. For now though, I am king. In the real world, Ichigo's berserker hollow form froze. Seeing this, Lisa, the current Vizard fighting, now that Kensai was taking a break, stopped as well, expecting Ichigo to emerge triumphant. Instead, Cazador stopped and took a look at himself. He was unique among all the non-Manos hollows he and Ichigo had seen. Most of them were very dark colors, but Cazador saw that his body was almost sheer white, with red decorations. He flexed his claws. Interesting, I've got to give Ichigo credit, this form certainly feels incredibly strong. He eyed his twin Zanpakuto curiously. I still have the Zanpakuto, does this make me an Arrancar? The Vizard were frozen stiff in shock. They could definitely tell that was the hollow speaking, and even if they hadn't heard the tones of a hollow, the way it referred to Ichigo as someone different. Ichigo, lost? Lisa asked, astounded. Cazador nodded at her. Barely, but yes. Guy's got spunk, though, and I'm sure he'll win the next time we fight. He laughed. Ichigo's too strong and stubborn to do anything but. Oh, the fight will be glorious. Orders, Shinji, Hachigen requested. Shinji was torn. This was an abomination, a Vizard who had lost to his hollow, and was now a force of annihilation, with the powers of both hollow and Shinigami readily available. On the other hand, Ichigo had confided that he and his hollow had a deal, and the hollow had already confirmed that he had not eaten Ichigo's soul, merely suppressed it for the moment. Let him go, Hachigen. Shinji, Hiyori screeched. What the hell do you think you're doing? Ichigo will win the next time they fight, Shinji said with a frown. Even his hollow admits that. He'll be back in 2 weeks. In the meantime, let his hollow grow stronger. If nothing else, It'll decrease the number of hollows out there. What if it joins Aizen? Love pointed out. Well, let's ask, Shinji suggested. Oi, hollow Ichigo. My name is Cazador. Nevertheless, he cocked his head curiously at the Vizard. Cazador half expected the Vizard to attack, and was honestly surprised they hadn't. What is it, Vizard? If I'm to call you by your name, my name is Shinji, the de facto leader of the Vizards replied. I must be in a dream. I'm talking hospitably to a hollow, and it's not attacking me. Anyway, my friend here has a question. He nudged Love. The afro-wearing man sighed at Shinji's obvious deflection of the hollow's attention. Just wondering, now that you have your freedom for the moment, what are you going to do with it? Cazador was finding this rather surreal as well. Shinigami, well, Vizard and Shinigami, not attacking me and trying to make me bring Ichigo back. Are they really going to just let me go? Well, I'm really fucking hungry. Let me tell you, considering I've never been hungry for anything but battle before, needing food is quite the odd sensation. I'd go find some humans out there, but they're weak-ass pansies, the majority of them. I want a challenge, and I'm no ordinary hollow. Not to mention it'd break the terms of my deal with Ichigo for me to eat a human, so I'm gonna figure out a way into Hueco Mundo, and go on an all-you-can-eat buffet on Manos. Cazador was surprised to suddenly find a shoe in his face. It dropped, and he glared at Hiyori. What the hell was that? Since the men are too fucking scared to ask, I'll do it. Hiyori raged. Do you or do you not have any thoughts about joining Aizen? The thought did cross my mind for a bit, Cazador admitted, watching the Vizard tense warily. But then I realized I'd have to serve someone aside from Ichigo, and that idea pisses me off. Speaking of, you never answered why you hit me with your fucking shoe. Hiyori smirked. I felt like it. Surprising everyone, Cazador chuckled again. Alright, I can respect that. Then he spiked his Reiatsu, reminding everyone that he was, at heart, a hollow and had no problems killing them all. Just don't do it again or I'll shred your intestines. Finally, Urahara's scientific mind could not take it any longer. Hey, Cazador, he called cheerfully. I'm curious, can you release the Bankai, or is that now your base Zanpakuto for you? Good question. Cazador wasn't stupid. He wanted to know everything he could about his new form before he left for Hueco Mundo. It would suck to suddenly get killed by a newbie because I don't know how my body works. Cazador casually dismissed Ichigo's black Tensei-Zangetsu and eyed his white one. He cautiously attempted to release the Bankai, and suddenly a small plume of smoke enveloped him. Cazador could feel his body reshaping itself, and in an instant, it was done. Tensei-Zangetsu was gone, reverting back to the elegant cleaver of Zangetsu's Shikai. His lizard-like body was gone as well, showing Ichigo's own body, with minor changes. There was a hollow hole in his sternum, and the eyes were no longer Ichigo's brown on white, but Cazador's amber on black. The top left part of their hollow mask, the part with red stripes on a white background, was the only part of the mask remaining, attached from the hairline down to the eyebrow. What the mask did not cover was revealed to be Ichigo's own face, with a maniacal grin. Cazador's clothes had also changed. He wore neither the Arrancar uniform that Aizen's army wore, nor Ichigo's Shinigami robes. Instead, he wore a simple white sleeveless vest that he left open, and relatively tight crimson leggings. Cazador was shoeless as well, and Zangetsu was carried on his back much the same way Ichigo had carried his version. A close inspection would show that Cazador's toenails and fingernails were both a little longer and sharper than most. Ah, there we are, Cazador said, stretching his limbs. Much better. I'm more familiar with this form, even if I'm not as strong in it. His voice was smoother now, more like Ichigo's, even if it didn't have the odd dual voice effect Ichigo had when he wore his mask. His grin widened as he slashed out into midair, creating a small garganta instinctively. Adios. Before anyone could say anything, he had jumped inside, disappearing towards the endless sands of Hueco Mundo. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.